All right.
Right on.
So, hi everyone, and welcome to this Vonnart interview where I have the legendary Justin Gerard here with me today. He is an artist that basically my whole friend group has looked up to since we found out about him at Spectrum, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago. And I've been like secretly obsessed with your work. And then once I found out you were married to Annie, I thought it was like, you guys are the perfect art couple. You guys are literally like the stigma that people want in their lives if they want to be like in this art relationship. And more than anything, I think both of you have such good natured morals and ethics to you both. I put you in like the same league as Alan Williams in terms of not only are they a good artist technically, but they're a good artist as a person. Or not a good artist as a person, they're just good people. And it's always a pleasure talking with you at cons, which I've been missing this year. And yeah, I'm really excited about this interview. So Justin, if you want to take away the floor and say who you are and what you do, thank you for joining me.
Well, my name is Justin Gerard, and thank you, Tim. That was awful kind of you. But my name is Justin Gerard. I do mostly fantasy illustration for clients like Riot Minds, Blizzard, Riot, Sony, Warner Brothers, and others. Love working with book covers, publishing, gaming art, and I've just really enjoyed art my entire life, and have enjoyed sort of both teaching and sharing a lot of that recently. So I don't know. I also should say in advance I'm terrible about talking about myself. So the best I can do is I really enjoy art, and I like sharing it. So.
Well, I've always thought you've been very good at talking about your art, so I feel like this will be no problem for you. So for those of you who are watching, though, the way that we're going to set this up, the format, is I have 10 questions that I ask every artist that I interview, and then we open it up to you guys. So if you put @Vonnart before your question, I will go and quickly type it into my little notes on the side here, and then I will ask them after the 10 questions. So I'm really excited about this, and I hope you guys are too. This is going to be a treat. And I feel like I always learn something new, and I hope you guys listening kind of pick apart the way that Justin's talking about his journey and then seeing how that can apply to you. And then you can take that and hopefully enrich your own journey. So let's jump into it here. You ready, Justin?
I'm ready.
All right. So the first question is, growing up, when did art seem to grab your attention?
I mean, I really can't remember a time that I wasn't drawing, like most kids drawing with crayons first, and then moving on to whatever else they went into after that. So I can't remember a time when art didn't grab my attention. But I will say that in high school, it became something that helped me communicate, I guess, communicate complex emotions in a way that I couldn't communicate verbally. And that I think that was when art became something where I knew I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And whether I'm paid for it or not, art has a emotional and spiritual and mental significance for me that it's going to be something I'm going to do in one format or another. It has given me a sense of peace, of serenity that I don't get from anything else, whether it be music or other forms of art. Something about two-dimensional visual art was always really compelling for me. The ability to create worlds from nothing, to personify complex emotions in an image, I always was really drawn to. And early on, it would have been, the Disney films and comic books that were probably the primary sources that I drew from. And that's probably, you could probably even see that in my art now, that those early inspirations are still there. But before I even saw any kind of film stuff, my mother once showed me an image that I've told the story once before to people on Twitch. So forgive me if you've heard this before, but my mother once showed me a picture when I was in high school or college that I had drawn when I was 4 or 5, very young. And it's the best piece of art I've ever done in my entire life. I've never done anything of even remote significance like it since then. It was the greatest single piece of artwork I've ever done. And this is when I was, very, very young. So I must have even known then in before I even had the memory to know what I was doing back then. But to describe it briefly, like it's a seascape. It's on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It was a drawing. It was a coloring book. I think there was like a duck and a mouse on the opposite side, and I'd scribbled their faces out and flipped it over to the other side. And on the other side, I drew a seascape, and there was coral reefs and waves, and the ocean was so deep it went to almost the very top margin of the paper. There's coral reefs and fish everywhere, and there's this enormous sprawling seascape and blues and greens and purples and reds, and in there is a tiny fish, and that tiny fish is swimming for all it's worth to get away from a gigantic fish, which has huge gaping teeth, enormous jaws, and it's coming right up to snap that tiny little fish in half. But it hasn't quite got there yet. Right before the moment of impact, before that tiny fish is snapped out of existence, a tiny little lizard has dove into the scene. Using the brightest green I could possibly find, I drew a lizard just diving in between the two. He's making a sacrifice in the middle of this huge sprawling ocean. He's going to be chomped in half by that big fish, but that little fish, which was so beautiful and perfect, is going to swim on to share its colors with the world for another day. And that little lizard is going to be, no one's going to remember him. He's dead. In this huge sprawling seascape, he's gone. That's it. It's a tragedy, except in the upper right-hand corner of the paper, just above the margin of the ocean, there's a sun. The bright sun above all is seeing this tragedy unfold, and it's beaming hearts down on the little lizard. I don't know what. I was 5 years old. I've never done anything of that magnitude since. I've never come anywhere close. It's been a joke ever since. That was the greatest single piece of artwork I've ever done in my life. And I think whatever I may say about like art helping me to, process emotions or whatever throughout high school, no, it's all been me just trying to get back to that moment of brilliant genius I had when I was 5 years old. So,
I mean, would you ever consider reimagining it with your current skill set?
No, I would never be able to. I would never be able to do it. I've sort of become overwrought. I would try and render the hearts in a way that would just make it seem so pedestrian and expected. The hearts were just scribbled in there and with raw authenticity, with an energy that I could never muster again. That was it. That was my one shot, and ever since it's just been me trying to recapture that, which is fine. It keeps me sane.
So your best work has been behind you since you were 5.
Long ago. When dinosaurs ruled the earth.
Oh, that's great. Well, actually, speaking of like your transition, that leads to the next question, which is, can we see some work from 3, 5, 10, 15 years ago, if you have any? And actually, I have this all saved out, so let me put up your pictures here.
Yeah, I sent you a lot. I think there's 40 some odd images, and there's some very embarrassing early ones. So we can move past the first ones real fast.
No, we're gonna stay on them very slow.
They were not. There's some real bad ones in there, folks.
All right, so we have it pulled. Anyway, we can actually still see both of our faces, which I've never done before. I'm becoming like a technical wizard by adding new windows, but I have it pulled up. So we're starting at your chef. So I guess you know which order your images are in. So if you just want to talk, or can you see on the screen which ones I have, or no?
I can see on the screen, yeah, and that's so yeah. If it's alphabetical, it's starting from 20 years ago. This was
20 years ago.
This is 20 years ago, and this is Photoshop like CS1. I don't even know if it was called CS1. It was the first version of one of the very first versions of consumer Photoshop, like that you could buy as a consumer. That I did this on with a tiny. It wasn't even, I don't even know that it was a Wacom back then, but some kind of digital tool. 20 years ago, and fish flambe was one of my first forays into it. I did this painting after reading a Don Siegmiller book on how to paint in digital. This is difficult because I grew up in a world that was all analog in the 90s when I'm only doing watercolor and pencil, and that's how I thought I was going to go into the art world. Well, suddenly, right before the year 2000, you suddenly have digital, and the world, the professional world, more importantly, is transitioning into using more digital than they are traditional. And so I want to do this as a career. I know that I need to now pick up these new tools, and I'm going to always end up being this person between two worlds. on the one hand, I have a foot in the analog traditional world, and in the other hand, I have a foot in the digital synthetic world. And even with I all through my life, I've liked physical games like football, basketball, all of that, but then also video games. So it's which, that's not a surprising thing in and of itself, but I feel like that's just kind of it for those of you in the audience who grew up in the 90s. You kind of know what I'm talking about, that you're always going to have that foot in both worlds. And so anyway, this was 20 years ago, a digital piece. We can move on. There's nothing else to see.
You say 20 years ago. So then like what, you were 8 because you're at 28 now?
No, I was born in 1980. So
oh, were you really?
Yeah, so that's right, folks.
40.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't know you were 40.
Yeah, 40 years old. That was the year 2000 right there. Ooh.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm sweating a little bit just looking at the old stuff. I don't.
What are you talking? This is still really good. When I ask people to show like 20 years ago, I'm expecting like the really bad DeviantArt fan art. I'm expecting like Pokemon teams. Like
there's some bad stuff coming. I've picked the best.
You filtered it.
Yeah, there's some. Well, I've shared a lot of the other stuff, but that was one of the better ones. There's some awful stuff coming. This one I actually still think is kind of funny, but this was watercolor and pen. I had just got a copy of Peter DeSev's step-by-step guide or step-by-step graphics magazine, where he had described his process, and I had taken a stab at it here and really enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun with it. Early traditional. So you saw in the last one, that's 20 years ago digital. This is 20 years ago traditional. Watercolor and ink.
Wow, this looks great for watercolor. I would have assumed this had digital like effects on it. That's great.
I think it's just probably overblown, overexposed. I think I don't know that I had a scanner back then, so it probably wasn't quite this vibrant or over contrast. It's just a little harsh, but yeah, I don't think there's. I did not start doing the blending stuff until much later, where I was actually, blending digital with traditional.
Okay.
And then the Bats one is watercolor and pencil again.
That's so cute too. Like all the ones that you sent me, I did like a quick scan through because I couldn't help myself, and I'm like, these are all good. Like Justin, you didn't send me any of them that were like.
No, there's some bad ones coming. There's some real bad ones coming.
I mean, even this one's as cute with the dog.
Yeah. So I spent quite a bit of time in England during my when I was back in school with a buddy, and did this whole series while I was there. I absolutely recommend this. I went to Europe and I had a credit card with a $5,000 limit, and I burned through the whole thing during my stay there. I saw everything I could, and that obviously is, when you're in school, it's a lot of money, and you've got 20% interest on those things. You better pay them off quick. It was a terrible decision, and I don't regret a minute of it. I think it was the best expenditure of that money at that time. Anyway, I came back to the States, and I ended up doing this one and 40 others like it, and sold them all at a show to try and pay off my exorbitant credit card bill based on my sort of inspirations from when I was traveling abroad. But I recommend everybody go travel abroad, go into debt. It's one of the few places where I think going into debt's worth it. I got home, paid off the credit card, chopped it in half, and haven't had a credit card since.
Really?
Yeah.
I do hope the lasting impression and advice that people take away from this interview is get a credit card, max it out, travel Europe when it becomes available again, and never regret.
That's it. I think I had a buddy that I used to roof with who always said, nothing broadens a person like reading, writing, and world travel. I actually think he's absolutely correct. So I spend that money, travel. I think it is something that does broaden a person. It gives such depth to you as a human being, but then also if you're going to be an artist, it gives you such depth to your art and such a wider perspective on sort of life experiences of other humans on the planet. And of course, our business is about communication and communication to other humans. So I think that, it not only pays off for you personally, that it's broadening your life experience, making your life more full, but also I think it broadens your work. It makes your work more interesting to other people and better able to communicate. So
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
no, I agree. And I think once, obviously with COVID, it's different, but once this all passes, I mean, there are different workshops around the world. I remember there was one in Spain I wanted to go to earlier this year, but obviously it got canceled. But I'm pretty sure Miles Art on Instagram was one of the mentors. And I was like, I would love to just go there and hang out and draw and just see Spain while I'm at it. So I think, once you're able to travel again, I agree with you. I do think even though it's an expensive upfront cost, it's like an investment in yourself, in your career, and it will pay back in like ways that you wouldn't expect it to.
Absolutely.
So anyways, I'll keep going.
Yeah, there's probably a couple more of those dogs there. Just there's not much to say about them. They're watercolor, and there might be pencil or ink or something. I was doing a lot of the Peter de Sèvres method way back then.
Well, even this one with Steve Irwin, I'm assuming this is Steve Irwin. What I realized with your work after like really analyzing, because I always saw you as such like a serious artist, but then after I started looking at your art, you have also a sense of humor within it that is like laced within it to the point that now when I look at your art, there's more to it than just being like serious. Even the ones where it's like serious dragon, you usually have something funny with the minor characters in the foreground or something in the scene that makes it a little more comical.
Yeah, I have a hard time getting away from it. Much to the chagrin of some of my like more hard high fantasy clients.
Oh, I love it.
Would prefer that I lose a bit of that what has been described as the Terry Pratchett wing of my of my art world. So I love Terry Pratchett. So I do love the humorous stuff. And this Steve Irwin one, there's a bit of a crazy story behind this. It's a watercolor and pencil, and it was the story is fairly obvious that this was done long before Steve Irwin died, and it was about him, paying off his co-actors, the crocodiles, the actors, because I mean, in the end, he's a good guy. Like you believed in him, right? Well, the guy who bought this from me had it framed under glass, had it on his wall. The day Steve Irwin died, tragic day. He came home, found this painting fallen off the wall and smashed on the ground, broken. The glass shattered everywhere. Yeah, that's the story he tells me. Crazy story. Love Steve Irwin. Sad to see him go. That's all I have to say about that.
Oh wow! I mean, that is a crazy occurrence, but I love.
Yeah.
I mean, all of your animal creatures are so funny because they have these really small eyes to a lot of them, and I think they're just so wonderfully rendered.
Well, thanks. I do love creatures. It's probably I of all the things, and I do love drawing humans and love drawing environments, but creatures are definitely my number one.
Mm-hmm.
Just the dogs here, little pug prince. Yeah. Okay, so I'm lagging behind. I'm about 10 seconds behind.
Oh, that's why.
So that's why I'm there. But okay, so now you're in the true darkness. Margarita.
The true darkness. Get out of here.
We were talking. When I was talking with at the Fantastic Arts Conference earlier this year. I told this story, but that when I signed up, when I got into illustration, I had this big dream. I was going to be doing work like N.C. Wyatt's work, like Treasure Island and Robin Hood and these classic fantasy stories, Moby Dick. I had big plans, and I really thought getting in there, this is the kind of work I'm going to be doing. I'm going to put my portfolio out there, and that's what I'm going to do. And what happened instead is I got a lot of jobs for Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. Clients very much like it. And when early on you got to pay the bills, you got to pay the bills. And so a lot of my work 20 years ago was not what my dreams really were. And in fact, almost none of it was. It was all really bad. One of the worst, my moment of dark despair, I've not put in here and I won't put in anywhere, was a client asked me to do a year's worth of industrial kitchen appliances illustrated in this Margaritaville style. They really liked this Margaritaville image, which I made the grievous error of actually having shown somewhere in a portfolio. I don't know what I was thinking. Guys, everyone listening who wants to be an artist, if there's work that you've done and you don't want to do more like it, don't let it be shown anywhere. Never put it in a portfolio. Never make a portfolio that you think people want to see this. Only make a portfolio of stuff that you want to do.
I do agree.
This was a terrible mistake. Now, that industrial kitchen appliances did pay my rent for a year, but and it did give me a chance to practice. Like, I was able to keep using their projects as a chance to practice and to improve my skills. And like, ooh, on this one I'll learn how to paint shiny metal. Ooh, on this one I'll learn how to paint, better perspective. Like, I was trying to find ways of making a bad situation good, but there's no two ways about it. It was a bad deal, and I was not following my passion in a way that's almost criminal. So anyway, I put this one out here just to show some real bad beginnings.
But I think this is actually, you're not giving us enough credit, because there's actually a lot of things within this scene that I think are pretty excellent. Like, even the lime on the bottom that's uncut, like, you have a good sense of bounce lighting from the sand. It has this well rendered. You have the specular lights on the little bumps and the wrinkles on the top. And the thing that I actually really like about this, I found that I'm really attracted to the little sparkles and little glistens you have. I've always been attracted to that from like late 80s movies. Like Secret of Nim had a lot of those like real time sparkles. Or like, do you remember in Legend? Like everything that has that glittery effect. I am so attracted to that. So when I see artists kind of like feel that same feeling, I'm like, oh no, this is actually great. I mean, regardless that it's a blender on a tiki head, it's still like a fun rendering.
Yeah, it's not what my dreams were. They're a far pace away from that lizard sacrificing itself for that little fish.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, your best work's behind you. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we're not trying to cynically grab the money.
These dogs.
It's fine. You got to when you're getting started, you got to pay that rent. Mm-hmm. Even now, you have to pay the rent. Like there's nothing morally wrong with that. Even from the perspective of an artist who's committed to doing like the thing they're passionate about.
I think it's great. I think everyone needs like stepping stones, and you just happen to be Margaritaville.
Well, there's a lot of others in there too. It was not a good time.
Yeah.
Just another dog. The drawing early on to round out the 20 years ago section of my life. And I feel like this is ending on a high note for the 20 years. I feel like there's a thing where it's like you're on a good path and you stray from it every now and then. You do things like the Margaritaville, and you, after getting done, you do a post-mortem and you think, this wasn't the path. I'm not on the good path. I'm on a dark trail, and this is going somewhere I don't want to end up. And so correcting and getting yourself back into the good path, it may take some time. You may have to actually you have to have some serious thought where you take a hard look at all the work you've done and try and figure out what's working and what's not. Mm-hmm. And this is one from 20 years ago where I felt like there's a lot of good narrative things going on. There's interesting line work and lighting, and okay, I'm on a good path here. This isn't where I want to be, but I'm on a good path. You know what I mean?
I mean, I love that the dark path is associated with Margaritaville, because you're like, there's like double meanings within it. Like, don't go too far into Margaritaville. Okay, so then moving forward, so this is, I'm assuming, 15 or 10 years ago? The one with the blue orc? I believe it's an orc? Troll?
Probably 10. It's probably going to be 10 years ago. Again, I'm a little bit behind, so I'm catching up in a moment.
I mean, this is where, honestly, your work is so well rendered, and I believe this is traditional, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, so yeah, this is, now we're getting back into, the good path.
Away from Margaritaville, yes.
Yeah, it took a long time to get to this, to figure it out, and I had to go through the industrial kitchen appliances digital art phase to realize, like, all right, digital art on its own is not good enough. There's something magical about the traditional media, and in this case, it's heavily watercolor. There
Oh,
is digital over top of this, but it's very heavily watercolor, as are all the rest. I think in this section.
is there colored
Uh,
pencil in this at all, or no?
yeah, there is a little color pencil in
Okay.
this, so I was definitely. It was a more laborious process than what I use now, which is probably the my only drawback is that this would take me twice as long as just
Mm.
working in graphite. Obviously, because you got color pencils. Now you're wrestling with all the trying to get all the colors right before then putting watercolor down. It's just a huge long extra step, but I really do enjoy it. So yeah, this is from The Hobbit. So speaking of the Lord of the Rings that we were talking about earlier,
Hmm.
this would be Bilbo and the Three Trolls. This is a crop from the original. Not sure why I didn't send you the full image, but
I mean, I will definitely ask you questions about this later on because I have a lot of questions for you specifically about all of Tolkien stuff because, well, there's a
yeah,
lot to it. So we'll get into it later. We'll get into it later. But I'll
right
keep
on.
going here. So the
And
next
yeah, the
ones we're
next
at the cavern, I believe.
yeah, so this is the Great Goblin, another scene from The Hobbit. Um, which again I show these because I feel like I've finally gotten myself back on the good path with these, and it was um, both because I was doing something that I was passionate about, and also just being honest with the fact that I loved watercolor as much as I was
Hmm.
at the time kind of despairing that digital was the only way I was going to make money, that I wasn't fast enough, and that I couldn't do corrections well enough in watercolor to truly, like on its own, watercolor alone, to do what I needed to do to survive in the market. I just didn't feel like
Yeah.
my watercolors were strong enough. And so at this point, I was realizing a really good way of blending the two, which I did feel was strong enough, and was kind of hitting that thing that I wanted, which is the most important thing. Is like this was the image that was in my mind while I was reading the story, which is I think in the end the thing I should have been chasing all along. Like, what's the picture in your head, and then what's the very best way you can actually communicate that picture? And so, yeah, this is the Great Goblin scene from The Hobbit, and it's watercolor and digital.
Well,
Um,
I have a few questions even about this because were you doing this on commission or are you doing this purely for personal agenda and like hoping to sell it from that point forward?
so, with this era, like 10 years ago, 10 years ago, there was a thing that was happening where people were digging up old classic books that I had loved when I was in high school. So Beowulf and The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, stories that I really, really liked. And before I did this project, I did Beowulf. And the reason I did it is because I heard that there was going to be a Zemeckis version of Beowulf. And I
Mm.
didn't want like to have Zemeckis's ideas erase my own ideas. And so I did my own version of Beowulf purely as um, sort of a love letter to the original text, and to just do the thing I'd always wanted to
Oh.
do. I was doing it after hours on my own time, and a publishing house that I was working for at the time picked it up and actually did a printed version of it, which was a lot of fun. Then when after that, The Lord of the Rings came out, and something the thing that I was afraid of happening actually did happen. Where, I have my own ideas for Lord of the Rings. When I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit in
Hmm.
school, I did sketches in the margins, and I had very specific ideas about what the orcs look like, what the dwarves look like, what Orthanc looked like, all the places. I had these ideas. Then I watched Peter Jackson's version of The Fellowship of the Ring, and he erased every bit of it. It was terrible because then when I tried to recall what I thought Boromir would look like, I couldn't see anything but Sean Bean, because I
Uh,
think genuinely Peter Jackson did a phenomenal job with particularly with the Fellowship, but the other ones were excellent as well. But the Fellowship of the Ring, and the first half of the Fellowship of the Ring, is probably some of the greatest film experience I've ever had in my life. It was so good to where I never thought I just I had lost all of my ideas. Well, so anyway, you watch those, and then after that, I think, well, oh no, they're going to be doing a version of The Hobbit. Well, I don't
mhm.
want the same thing to happen with The Hobbit, and so I ended up going back to The Hobbit, rereading it, and kind of picking out a couple of the key scenes that for me were the big moments of the story, and doing my own version of them before I saw Peter Jackson's version. So, and I'm glad I did.
Okay, I need to jump into this because clearly we got to talk about it right now then because like a lot of people in the chat may not know this. I've never really seen the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movies. I don't really know a lot about it, surprisingly, because I love movies and I draw fantasy stuff all the time. But I was like, I'll save it for like a rainy day, like when I really need to see it, it'll like hit me. But then it was one day Josh convinced me to start listening to The Hobbit in an audiobook. And I never saw the movies or anything, so my depiction were actually your drawings, Justin. The way that I was seeing everything was actually and even like their proportions, like everything. It felt like a Jim Henson style movie, like the Dark Crystal version, but like with Hobbit characters and stuff. And it was well, what's crazy is I can't believe you just even mentioned this, because I literally decided I'm not going to watch the Hobbit movies, because I am now picturing this world where they're a little more like, I don't want to say Muppety, but they definitely have more like a fantastical look to them. And then even looking at this, I didn't realize that this was from the Hobbit, but this is exactly what I was picturing. And I love this style of fantasy. And even after watching Lord of the Rings, I think it's great, and I think a lot of people like that realism grit. But I actually really love kind of when fantasy goes overboard. Like I love Legend. I love, the Labyrinth, those type of like over characterizing of characters. And I love your Goblin depiction and orc depictions, because in the movies, they're very like, scary and rubber. But I kind of like when they're more kind of goofy and exaggerated features. And I do agree. I think Fellowship was my favorite out of the three. And I think it did capture a lot of what I liked about the fantasy. But in my mind, this is the style of The Hobbit that I'm going to keep forever. So I'm never going to watch the Hobbit movies, I decided.
Oh, well, that's that's heartwarming to hear. Yeah, that's the way you're describing it. Talking about those old films like Legend and
any of them, Willow, any of them.
Willow, all the ones with the extreme practical effects of all of them, like Labyrinth, where there's so much Jim Henson in that, and people just stumbling around trying to interact with these big clunky costumes. Yes. That's how it should have been, not the green screen paradise that it turned into. It should have
green screen paradise.
Like The Mandalorian, which I'm sure there's a lot of green screen in that. I'm not knocking green screen, but The Mandalorian season 2 that I was talking about at the beginning of the stream, I feel like so much of what makes that wonderful is that feel of realness that you get from practical puppeteering that was going on, that I think just we needed more of. Now I understand that's expensive, but I think that after you've done something like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, one of the greatest blockbusters of all time, you've probably got the budget to go ahead and make a lot of really good practical effect puppets. That's personal opinion, but I think Peter Jackson's a genius. I think everyone involved in that first film from Weta, they're a genius. So I understand they had a lot of complexities to work against when they made The Hobbit, but I share your vision of it, and would have loved to have seen more practical effects in it than did.
I still don't see it out of the question where they might pick up your type of art style for like a future Hobbit release, because from what I hear, the whispers is that people don't like the Hobbit movies nearly as much as the Lord of the Ring ones, and that they quote unquote messed up. So I think it would be maybe in 10, 20 years, who knows, maybe your art style will be like the foundational base for, I don't know, some type of filmmaker to pick it up.
Well, I'm here if anybody would love to lend some help. But at any rate, even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't take away from the fact that The Hobbit as an audiobook, as a book, I think is a wonderful experience. I don't think that everything needs a Netflix series. I think you can have just art that is its own thing, and I think the writing itself is a wonderful expression of that story. And so I even if it doesn't happen, it's okay. I just ask that if it does happen, you do a really good job and you do those practical effects. Annie and I watched this. Now, it sounds crazy, but for our anniversary, Annie and I we've been married 7 years. We had our anniversary this past Monday, and for our anniversary, we built our children a bunk bed fort. I know, a weird way to spend an anniversary. And then after that, we ordered sushi and watched John Carpenter's The Thing, the original one. And I know, again,
Oh, while eating sushi?
while eating sushi.
Ugh.
Probably a weird way to spend an anniversary, but it was great. And I love. We both just. It holds up, by the way. Anybody who still wants to watch
Agreed.
it, like it really holds up. That is a strong sort of sci-fi horror film. Really good.
I would say far better than the remake still.
The remake, don't bother with it.
Nope.
And the reason is because, well, first of all, how are you going to follow up Kurt Russell? I don't know how you're going to follow up Kurt Russell. I mean, you put him in anything, he's dynamite. However, the thing that was really amazing is those practical puppets that are in there. And Andy and I were talking about it afterwards. Like, what a time to be alive. You got to build these crazy elaborate puppets. And then for a few seconds, you just douse them in slime. They film them, and then you light them on fire. And that was the thing. It's the whole experience of monster making.
100%.
You create the physical thing, you light the thing, there's smoke, there's fire, there's slime, and then all the characters are now standing around its burning husk. That's all I ever wanted was to do monsters like that. I loved it. So 10 out of 10. John Carpenter's The Thing, real creepy, well done, and that's how monsters I still think should be done.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I've been watching a lot of movies I've never seen before, like Neverending Story. And yeah, there's parts of it that feel kind of clunky, but overall, I love the way that these big things look. There's something about it where, like, it's there. It's real. They're interacting with it. And sometimes, like, the eyes move kind of slow, but I don't care. I would rather have that.
I love it. And the actors, I mean, you hear it from, even a number of the actors who worked on the Hobbit film. There's recorded moments of them yelling at the producers that, like, I can't act against nothing, because they're just delivering their dialogue to a green wall, and they need something to personify what they're speaking to, and so there's something said for, like, characters who now have to interact with this weird puppet, that it does something to the behavior, to the atmosphere, and to the mood of everything. And I know now it's different. Now with the films, I mean, I don't know if you've seen how they're doing it now, but they have those enormous LED screens. So the character's not looking at the green screen anymore. They're looking at, whatever the environment is supposed to be.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, apparently it's real crazy now. I don't know enough about it, but that makes more sense to me. But if you're going to do monsters, come on, there's something amazing about that old school style. And again, about blending digital and traditional. There's something really strong that's possible there, where you have traditional, armatures and creatures and everything, like analog made physical items, but then the mouths are digital, so they can still have all those crazy expressions that are, of course, really hard and expensive to articulate mechanically. You can do that part digitally while still having the lumbering creature or whatever it is as a physical thing on your set. Anyway, this is aside completely, but just to say that I blend of digital and traditional.
I probably have so much in common with you on that, like, taste level. And I don't even mind if a whole background set is painted, like you see in, like, early movies like Wizard of Oz. I actually like when you can, even though you can tell it's a set, it has that, like, fun movie feeling, and you don't need, like, a 3D green screen effect in the background.
I love it. They do that in The Mandalorian too. They've got some matte painted backgrounds.
Do they really?
Yeah, it's so cool. I love that stuff. And of course, back in the day, those are actual paintings. Like, ooh, what a skill set to be able to make environments on that kind of grand scale, to be used in movies and everything. Like, ooh, some of those sword and sandal epics from back in the day.
Sword and sandal epics.
They're amazing for some of those matte paintings.
But anyway. my final question for this, I know we're on, like, one painting for a long time, but it's so interesting to hear this. But is there actually a Hobbit book with your illustrations throughout it?
No, so I worked a bit with Warner Brothers on the films, on the Hobbit films, and so they purchased a lot of these after the fact. So there's not a book per se. I think they might have ended up in some games. They may have. I think they were reproduced there. But no, there's no book. And if anybody ever wanted to do a book or a calendar of any sort, email me. I'm definitely available. Would love to do more Hobbit related work.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that there's not, like, a compiled version of all your Hobbit drawings in, like, a book that people can buy and then read. And one day that's got to happen.
I'd love to if anyone's interested.
All right, so I'll keep moving on. So then we got Smaug. Oh my god, this is still so good.
Yeah, the Smog was a tough one to move past. It was for a long time. It was like the only painting I had worth talking about.
Oops.
Um, and that was another one like the kid drawing the knight on the sidewalk, where I had to kind of like figure out where am I going wrong. Like Smog was the good path, and I did a lot of paintings in the years after this. I didn't include a lot of them, but there's a lot of paintings in the years after this where I was sort of straying from the path, and I couldn't figure out what was it about Smog that worked, or this Battle of Five Armies. Like, what was it about those that worked, but that isn't working about this one? I think that's always a hard thing to do as an artist, is to, if you ever have a time where you look back to something you did 5 years ago and you're like, that was way better than whatever I'm doing now. Ooh, that's a bad feeling. Very bad feeling. And Smog was one of those ones where like I did it and then I didn't do anything quite like it for some time afterwards, which was really troubling.
Yeah, I mean, this one is excellent, so kudos to you on that one.
Well, thank you.
So the next one looks like a bear attack scene.
Yeah, this is the Battle of Five Armies, also from the Hobbit. Oh, a bear.
No. I mean, like I haven't got to the part in the audiobook, so seeing this, I'm like, I have no idea what this is from. But knowing it's from the Hobbit, I'm like, oh, I can look forward to this giant battle then with a bear.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry. Spoiler alert. Giant bear. Giant bear happens. So a lot of fun. Love epic mayhem. I don't get to do enough of it. Recently, I did a scene involving scorpion pumpkins fighting a bunch of very tiny heroes, which was a lot of fun. But before that, it had been a long while since I had done anything of that scale. And I love doing these big, complex battle sequences.
What I think is, like, as people get more familiar with your work, I always consider you one of those like masters of contrast, because you're really good at illuminating certain areas of the scene and then putting like a really dark contrast silhouette or figure in front, and it adds such this depth of like perspective throughout the scene. And you're really good at these big battle type scenes because all these foregrounds characters are so dark, but each of them you can still tell with like the glint of light that you still gave them. You can see the forms, you can feel the render, and then as you move throughout the scene, I always believe that I don't like realistic lighting as I like fantastical lighting better, because I think it helps illuminate and kind of create this very fantastical is probably the most simple word I can use, but it does create this very fantastical feeling when I look at this, and it's just beautiful. So I think people that are watching this is how you do contrast, without it being super obvious either, because I think people think like very heavy dark, very heavy light butting up against each other, but you have a mixture of all of it, So good job.
Well, thanks.
All right, so then moving on to I doubt I'll be able to say this correctly, the Silmarillion. I don't even know what that is yet.
Yeah, so it's the Silmarillion. It's sort of like the prehistory to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So it's an unfinished book that Tolkien wrote. That was a lot of the backstories and lore for both The Lord of the Rings and sort of all the history of the Middle Earth series. And they've recently compiled it into a beautiful set of books illustrated by Alan Lee. Which is why I kind of left this series alone for a while, is because Alan Lee did such a dynamite job. Gorgeous stuff. And apparently they read more linearly than the original collection, because the original collection was just sort of his cliff notes on a lot of it, or at least that's how it felt. I mean, they read really well, but it's just a hodgepodge of different stories from Middle Earth. And this is Glorfendell and the Balrog. It's a scene that gets mimicked over and over and over again in Tolkien. So Gandalf and the Balrog is a very similar circumstance. So there's sort of echoes of these moments from the Silmarillion in both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that are really cool. And this is probably one of my favorite confrontations in the entire series.
Oh, yeah, this is great. So this is the same Balrog from Fellowship. See, now I'm starting to piece things together. Or maybe not.
Well, it's not the same Balrog, I don't think. I think I can't remember the name of this this Balrog in particular. I don't think it's the same one. It possibly could be, but it's just sort of an echo. Though Glorfendell, some people would actually agree with you that these are the same characters, that it's just an echo of the same battle. But I don't know if that's canon or not.
Okay. Okay.
There's probably some experts in the chat who will set me straight on that. So I won't say anything more. Just that I know that Tolkien loved using this sort of arrangement, which is great. It's one of my favorites.
And then, we got your beautiful profile picture.
Oh yeah, a classic beast.
So is this Beauty and the Beast or just Beast?
It's not really either. It's just a random monster. It was just a portrait of a monster, and but it does have that vibe, the of that sort of thing. I don't know why. I just I really like the idea of this scene. I have no idea why I painted it. It's just something fun.
I'm almost more curious, what made you choose this as your profile picture for all your social media accounts?
I don't know. It won a Spectrum Award many moons ago, and so I don't know if they liked it. It seemed like it was good enough to throw on as a profile
to represent you as a person and an artist. We got Beast.
I liked it. I don't like posting a lot of photos of myself, so I've always preferred this. I don't know why.
Yeah. I agree with that. Okay, this next one, I'm assuming this is all watercolor and colored pencil, but it is another good example of how you use contrast so well, but there's no obviously evident dark values, and yet you still have the contrast read so well.
Yeah, so this one is also from the Silmarillion. This is Beren and Luthien and Charkaroth. Really cool moment, probably one of the most interesting and fun moments in all of the Middle-earth lore. And this is a pure watercolor, so it's watercolor, and there's a little colored pencil in there as well. But it's, of all the ones from this era, it's one of the few that I ever just left as a watercolor, and I didn't actually add the digital over it. And this really does give kind of a good idea of what my watercolors look like. And you can see it's just a lower key overall. Not as vibrant, not nearly as saturated or dark. And so you can maybe get a sense of why I was a little bit hesitant to try and only do watercolor back in those days. Now I feel a little bit better about it, but at the time I was very self-conscious that I just had a hard time getting darks that I liked. And so if I blended traditional and digital, I got something that was perfectly exactly what I wanted. But at the time, I just had I just rarely hit it when I only did watercolor.
I mean, I still think this reads so excellent. It almost feels purposeful for it being lighter in values, but the way that I read it is I think it's excellent.
Well, thank you. It's one of the few that I feel like kind of turned out from that era that I still can stand to look at. Yeah. I'm very critical of my older stuff. As anyone who's followed my work or is on our Discord or Twitch or anything, they know that I do have a penchant for burning old art. That every year I'll make a sacrifice to the art gods to clear the failures of the last year and to raise my overall average.
And are you going to do that again at the end of this year?
Oh, we already did.
Oh, you already did?
Yeah, I already burned some on Halloween's Eve, as is tradition.
As is tradition.
And this one is this is The Wrong Door, which I did a lot of art that had a bit of a Terry Pratchett vibe during this period. I kind of did stuff that was a little more fun, and I actually did work before Terry died. I did a lot of work on the Discworld series, and so this is, I think we're now into 5 years ago, where a lot of it is perhaps a little more humorous fantasy, again more Terry Pratchett fantasy, and very much like sort of the classic dungeon master kind of art. So I was heavily into this, and I keep going in and out of this part of my my love of tabletop gaming and Terry Pratchett and role-playing games and that kind of thing. So this definitely has a bit more of that dungeon master role-playing game vibe to it. And it's a watercolor and ink done in a sort of Arthur Rackham style with a little bit of digital saturation added to it.
This isn't like a half digital?
No, this is the colors are punched up a lot. The original, I think I posted the original on Muddy Colors back then, but the original, I mean, it looks pretty much like this, but it's desaturated.
Oh,
It's more like Arthur Rackham colors rather than this, which is punchier.
yeah. Well, I think this is also a good testament of all of your metals or all of your like your doors. Everything feels heavy and it's like thick, and they're almost like larger. Like even the hinges on the door are larger, so it does create this very. I don't know. I love the look of it, and I think if anyone gives you crap about having more of like a fun, cartoony, humorous style, I think this is amazing, like top tier for sure. Oh wait, no, I can't hear you anymore. Hold on. Oh wait,
Can you hear me now?
there we go. There we go.
Okay, weird. Yeah, so there's some IPs that I've always really liked that are a bit more serious, and so those are the ones that I've kind of tried to pull. I don't know, maybe pull myself into two separate modes if I need to, where I do have one that's a little more humorous, but then one that is a little more high fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there's clients that I've wanted to work with for a long time, who do actually do more serious stuff. And I can't necessarily name all of them right now, but I love them both, and I am probably always going to want to be doing something in both fields.
Yeah.
But this is definitely more of the humorous side. I think 5 years ago I was definitely leaning into more of the Terry Pratchett stuff.
Yeah, I think it's excellent.
Well, thank you.
And then the next dragon, I know this is the image that I first remember seeing at your booth, and I was like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and this is Let the Wizard Do the Talking, trying to pass some kind of some dragon in a sulfuric pass. And this is watercolor and digital too. A little more opaque digital in this one. So I had learned some new tricks by this point, and I do tend to think that most of your sort of art method and style, for lack of a better word, is just a bunch of simple tricks and gimmicks. And the longer you keep painting, the more of those tricks and gimmicks you're going to pick up. And when I did this one, I had picked up a number of new tricks. So there was a little bit of better texture and some other fun lighting effects that I have in this one. So I look back at this one, maybe not as objectively as I could. I look at it in a way where it's like, man, I really figured something good out in this one. And so I always really loved this piece just because there were some color things that I just was never able to grasp in a lot of my previous art. And in this one, they all made sense. And so this one, it's sort of like, it's like in all the Final Fantasy games, like I finally upgraded like my Ice Storm spell, and now it's Ice Storm 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to really cast a blizzard now. Like it's that kind of thing where I feel like I did upgrade a spell to a new level in this one, it's a good feeling. Even if it's maybe not like one of my better pieces, I like the piece because of that.
Oh yeah, I think it's excellent. And I think for the people that are looking at this image, like don't just focus just on the dragon. If you focus on the entire piece as a whole, like even the rocks on the bottom, the slight glow you have on the underside where it's like warmer, and then you have this like green liquid pools that it looks like they're stepping in, and it gives such a good contrast that I think when people look at paintings, I think we're so programmed because of social media, like do quick looks, and like you only see an image for like 2-3 seconds. But I implore everyone watching to, like, especially with your work, Justin, like really look at the entire scene, because you can learn a lot about painting and how to navigate adding lighting and color to a work when you're really looking at the entirety of a piece, not just the focal point. So this to me is like a beautiful example of that.
Oh, thanks.
Of course. And then moving, this is a cute warthog. I haven't seen this one.
Yeah, so this is all oil. I think this was the first painting I did after Annie and I met, where one of the first times we'd ever sort of hung out and did some painting together. She was working on a Kelpie, I think, and I painted this little warthog rider.
This is so lovely.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun.
Oh, and David's here. David Peterson. Man, there are a lot of comments. I promise I'm like capturing them. I'm writing them down on a notepad. Me and Justin are clearly just having fun talking about his work. We'll get to those questions. I promise. But also, this is another great example of your creatures are so good because they like have this beautifulness to them while they're, I mean, hideous in like a lot of ways, but they're so cute and adorable in a lot of other ways that I think you really are a master of like that fine zone in between.
Oh, well, thanks.
So then, I know, I'm just going to be complimenting you this whole time. So at some point, you'll be like, just
no, stop.
Yeah, like,
stop.
I can't take it. So now we got the listening to the eggs.
Yeah, the Dragon Doctor, which
Doctor.
Some really talented guys did a sculpt of this, actually. And I can't post it yet, but I will be posting it on my Instagram soon. That there's some really awesome work being done by a robot rocket on this one. I'm blown away by. I love it. But anyway, this is all traditional too. This is watercolor and pencil on one of my favorite watercolor papers, Arches Hot Press. If you're looking to get into a little bit of watercolor, I highly recommend Arches Hot Press. The pink pads, they're really nice. And this was just a fun one. Again, kind of in that Terry Pratchett line of things.
Wait, forgive my ignorance. When you say the pink pads, is the paper actually dyed pink?
No, it's dyed this sort of like cream colored.
Okay.
But the pink ones are I think it's 90 pound. It's a specific weight. It's really nice, and they come pre-sealed. So there's like wax sides, so you don't actually have to stretch or tape them down. You just paint right in the pad. You're done with it, you cut it out, and then there's another sheet. They're really, really nice. It's beautiful paper. It's also, if you're only a graphite artist, they are dynamite. They're some of the best, I think, some of the very finest drawing paper.
Really?
So I highly recommend them. They soak up the graphite. It goes on very nice. So even though they're meant as watercolor paper, I think they're excellent for drawing on.
And they're just called pink pad paper?
No, it's just look up Arches Hot Press, and then you should see whether you're on like Blick or Jerry's or something. You should see them. They're in a pink pad.
I'm gonna order these after the stream.
They're nice. They're real nice. And hey, also if you want to get, if you want to splash around like with some, charcoal water, it's water soluble charcoal or water soluble leads. Obviously you could do that kind of thing too.
Honestly, I really should. I'm at that point where I'm getting bored with graphite. Not in like this is a whole tangent in itself, but basically, I think I'm ready to explore as well. So maybe like buying this paper will give me the inspiration to just see. But I really want to get into stained glass this winter, and that's like my number one goal.
Oh, how cool!
What it's been like a dream for a while. So I'm like, okay, I got to stop making excuses. Like I just gotta do it.
Just do it. Right on. That's awesome.
So then we have this next one of a little baby dragon, I assume, or a chameleon dreaming about or reading a book about a big dragon.
Yeah, it's Morzog, Lord of Destruction. But yeah, and I did a whole series of these for Dragon Con, and I've got a couple others that I want to do as well. But yeah, Morzog is it's very much us, right? Like we're just these little people, but we're reading like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or whatever, and we're imagining ourselves as the fire breathing engine of destruction. Or the heroic warrior, and typically we're just sitting in our nice, comfy houses, climate controlled, not living in the wilderness or having to scrape by on a day-to-day basis. But that there's something. It really is. It's that there's something really wonderful about the fantasy genre. That it gives us a moment to see the world from a different perspective. So the whole series is largely to do with that, just the joy of reading and again of the fantasy genre.
So then I guess, is this something that you're gonna like have your kids like forcing them to read essentially? Like, do you find it important enough where you want your kids to grow up reading rather than being too, guess, used to just watching movies of a story?
Yeah, I definitely do. Though there'll be a little bit of do as I say, not as I do, because while I read voraciously, it's almost 95% 5% of it is probably audiobook. I love that Audible subscription, and I wear it out every month. I've been speaking of Terry Pratchett. I've been rereading through the Night's Watch series recently, which is just a wonderful series of books. I missed it. I miss working with the Pratchett folks. I'd love to do some more work for them at some point. But I'll have a hard time when it comes to telling my kids to read, and we read to them now. But there's going to be a lot of you should read with your eyes. It's important. Whereas I don't read.
Well, I mean, you're at the point in your career where it's almost impossible to like set aside a 20-hour span of just being able to read a book. And honestly, I think that's the beauty of like we have recorded audiobooks that we can actually engage with while doing essentially our work, which is our passion as well.
Which honestly, it isn't that weird. Like, we're in when you look at the scope of human history, all the tens of thousands of years that we have been passing along information to one another, like this blip on the radar of reading our stories and have not having relied almost exclusively on the oral tradition for our stories. For the longest time we had pictures and oral tradition. There's tens of thousands of years of it, and it's only been the last few hundred where this has been a thing where it's like, well, no, our kids need to learn how to read, it's a good thing. I'm glad we have it. I love reading as a concept, but I still think there's something magical about the oral tradition especially for narrative. And so I definitely will encourage my children in every way that I can that yes, you should read. There's something amazing about it, and there's something different about the text rather than the audio, because of course you can reread a section, you can take a moment and pause. There's so many things you can do with a book that you can't necessarily do with an audiobook. So I think there's good reasons to do it, and I hope they do.
I mean, I honestly couldn't see them not engaging with Hobbit or Lord of the Rings on some level. So
now that will be a rule in the house. They will have to. They will read it. It will be a yearly ritual for us. So that's not negotiable.
So this next one, I mean, another great example of your work with color, but the two guards at the door.
Yeah, so spells are hard.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, spells are hard. As he's trying his best to read his spell book, and it's not quite right. You can only imagine what he said right before this. Probably tried to pull some crazy Clint Eastwood line, but now his spells aren't working.
Yeah, anyway, his voice cracked while he's trying to say the spell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, this is I had been working with a lot of the Terry Pratchett folks when I did this one, and so there's the comparisons between this wizard and Rincewind from the series are apt. For those of you in the chat pointing it out, yes, I'd actually been drawing that before this, and at the time I thought this was a very much his own wizard, but as time has gone on, I've realized I was still just drawing Terry Pratchett stuff. So
yeah, well, still excellent.
Well, thank you. It was a fun one to do.
And then entering a dark hole with red eyes.
Yeah, so the cave. This is simply, I took a trip to Switzerland. I thankfully, this time when I went to Europe, did not have to max out a credit card. My buddy that I went with and I found a really cheap way of doing it, which was rent bicycles in one part of the country and then just hit Airbnbs and hostels all the way to the other side of the country. And so we rented bicycles in, I think it was Geneva, Switzerland, and then zigzagged up through the country to Zurich, hitting Bern and Interlaken on the way. And this was just a place that we happened to stop at just to eat lunch. There was just this cave up in the hill. And I took a bunch of photos of it. And then when I came back, I'd been thinking about this place the whole while. And when I came back, I illustrated this scene just really as a kind of a love letter to Switzerland and to that whole adventure. But if anyone gets a chance, bicycling in Switzerland is wonderful. Absolutely worth it. Highly recommend it. They have great. They have these like color coded routes that go all through the country, and you just get a bike and follow the routes. There'll be signs, and you'll go through
Oh.
pasture land and mountains and cities, and it takes you all over the place. You just find the trail you want and follow it, and you can bike for hundreds and hundreds of miles. We did it over the course of, I believe, 10 days, and it was absolutely awesome. So anyway, this whole image is really just a love letter to Switzerland.
You know, the more that I hear you talking about your art, I know you said at the beginning you're like quote unquote bad about talking about your art. Not only are you like really good at it, but you're like the natural storyteller. You're really good at like doing the whole rising action and like you like getting the excitement from it. Even like your fish story from when you were 5, there was like a build up, and then you kind of find out story. You're really good at it.
Well, I think talking about the art maybe is one thing. I think talking about me as an artist is the other thing. I think I probably have a harder time. I always have a hard time talking about me or me as an artist because it's such a weird. I don't know how to describe it, but art, like okay, I can now this I can explain because I know what I was thinking at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
there is usually a story behind it. So yeah, it's just more me feeling awkward talking about myself. I think.
You know what? I feel like a lot of artists feel like, why do I want to talk about myself? Like, let's talk about something that I actually like get excited about. Like, yeah, like the dwarves finding this cave and there's something in it. Like, I get it. I get that for sure.
Exactly.
All right, going on to this one is also excellent. Them fighting the dragon.
Yeah, so another one from the Silmarillion, the Fall of Gondolin, and was originally commissioned by John Flesquez for the poster for Spectrum
Mm-hmm.
several years ago. So thank you, John. Was one of the most fun commissions I ever had, and he was a great art director. He was like, "So what do you want to paint?" I was like, "Well, there's this scene from the Silmarillion that's really good. Here's a thumbnail I have for it." He's like, "Sounds good. Can you have it here in a month?" It's like, "Okay."
You did this in a month?
Yeah, it was about a month. I mean, it was really probably about 3 weeks, I think, of actual painting. So,
I mean, I know that was one of the questions actually someone asked was how long roughly does the piece take? So is it usually like a 3-week range?
so between for a scene like this, it typically is somewhere between 10 and 17 days, somewhere in there. 14 days is when I start losing enthusiasm for an image, and I'm kind of itching to start something new. So
yeah, right when you're like at the 80% mark, you're like, okay, I'm ready.
yeah, I mean, I can only take staring at something for so many days before I just need to move on. Also, and before I start damaging the piece, I think if I haven't been able to sort out the problems in the image by then, I probably need to just let it go.
I totally agree with that. Like you don't want to get into that over rendering stage.
Yeah.
So I know the next one is I believe you call it the March of the Dragons or I think it's March of the Dragons, right?
I had a lot of different names for it. It was the plague. It was Plague of Dragons was the original title of the piece, just a Plague of Dragons. And then I ended up turning the whole idea of a Plague of Dragons into its own story. So there's an entire sort of chapter book story that's been written out about it with a number of other illustrations already as part of it. So then I just changed this to Flight of Dragons because that's what everybody calls it anyway.
Yeah.
Much like the original. So everybody just calls it that. So we'll just leave it as that. But it's just the original Plague of Dragons image.
I mean, to me, I know I told you at a con long ago, but to me, this is like a magnum opus. Like this truly showcases your skill and like your technical ability on so many levels. That I think this is such an incredible image. I actually have it on my wall. I have like what I consider like the masterworks on my wall in front of me, so I'm always staring at them. So just know you're one of them.
Oh, well, thanks.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so gorgeous. I could talk about that for too long, so I'll move on. And this is, I mean, you have these little creature kind of silhouettes, if you want to call them it. But you do them, it seems, monthly, and I believe this is for a Patreon to-do list, essentially.
Patreon rewards, and really so was the Plague of Dragons thing. The Plague of Dragons, I would not have been able to do any of that if not for Patreon. So the supporters on there, you guys are the ones who make any of this possible, and I really owe you a huge debt of gratitude, because this is now, it's like finally me on the path that I always wanted to be on, was doing this kind of work, and I wasn't getting the commissions for it, and so it's either, well, make no money, and and do the thing you love, or make money and do things that you find soul crushing and poisonous. Margaritaville. So, but yeah, the Bog Jabberwocky is part of the Monster of the Month series, and it's just a challenge. I started this whole series as a personal challenge to try and take my character designs, like for a vignette for video game stuff. It was I had a commission, and they'd asked me to do some dragons for them, and it took me 20 hours per dragon, and it turned out okay and everything, but they were kind of disappointed with how long it took me, because they were like, well, we would have liked, we had a 2-week deadline, we would have hired you for more if we could have. And I thought, man, if I could have just done this in half the time or a quarter of the time, I could have done so much more. And so I thought, all right, I want to start a personal project of something that I'm really passionate about, that I love, that I can use as a chance to try and move my skill level up. So if I can do the same level of excellence in 5 hours, what is currently taking me 20 hours, then that's going to have made all of this, a great exercise. And so that's been the purpose of this thing. And the Bog Jabberwocky here probably took me 17, 18 hours. I was not doing good at this point, but later on we'll get to some other monsters in this portfolio where I did get down to 5 hours. And so, and didn't really lose any quality. So it in many ways turned out to be one of the most perfect things.
I mean, like I said, I won't compliment you too much because we got a lot to go through. But like for those watching, like look at the side of the mouth, and like this is a great example of where contrast can be used so effectively, because there's a lightness on the body, and then it really makes then the side of the face stand out so much, and it like punches forward, and you do it throughout. And it's subtle. It's not like one of those obvious things, but the more you like look around the actual subject matter, I mean, it becomes so obvious, at least to me, and I want to always point it out because you have such a mastery of doing it. So yeah, this is great.
Well, thanks.
And then yes, like I said, you're gonna be like, Tim, stop. But now we have looks like a wizard being chased.
Oh yeah. So choosing flight was chosen. This was another back to the Patreon thing. So I put a bunch of sketches I had done up for a poll and just asked them what they'd rather see. And so this was one they picked. And I did a whole sort of Dungeon Master series of images like this, of sort of Dungeon Master moments where the dice, you got a real bad roll on that dice, and this is the outcome, was the purpose of it. And there's 5 or 6 other images in that kind of vein of Spells Are Hard or The Wrong Door or Choosing Flight. I've always loved images of the wrong thing happened. It's not that like, that climactic moment of like the swords clashing, or victory over the defeated foe. It's the moment of absolute peril, of high peril, was sort of the purpose of all of it. So before everything goes to absolute ruin.
I love it.
A lot of fun. I love working on this kind of thing.
So then we have the Crabit.
Yeah, so the Crabit, which some of the astute observers who are also children of the 90s in the chat will know that the Crabit is not necessarily an original name. When I first drew this like a crab rabbit, I thought it was hilarious, and so I just painted it overnight. I just went right at it, and I finished it in like 5 or 6 hours. It was an excellent one. It was one of the best ones. It came together really well, and I had a great time doing it. And then somebody on the Instagram, when I posted it, reminded me of the original, where the original Crabit was, which is from the Max series from MTV. And again, you kind of have to be probably a child of the 90s to remember the Max. It's a comic book that MTV did an animated series of way back then. But the Crabit, who is hunted by the is a creature in there. And it must have been lingering around in my subconscious. So I guess this is sort of a subconscious homage to my 90s teenage years, but also at the same time, just a fun chance to kind of make a crazy monster.
And I guess for those who don't know, do a lot of these monsters start as pencils that you scan in and then work digitally?
Oh yeah. They all are. So I mean, I've probably got some here. This was a harpy. They all start out. Let's do this. This is the Mustard Knight. So there's color versions of all these, but they all start out with this level of finish and detail. Here's a good one. This is from one we did, the Fungus Knight, and so yeah, these are fun ones. And they all actually start out as tiny little ink thumbnails. Let's see if I can actually show some of them. I keep one of these little sketchbooks. All right, here we go. So I keep a sketchbook about like this, and I do all of them like that. So I don't know if the Crabit. I thought the Crabit was in here, but I guess it's not. I think that the Hydra turtle is right there. So he's one that's made it into the series, and I think that's all from this page. But anyway, yeah, they all start out very tiny, and then we do pencil drawing, and then digital color over top, and that's turned out to be kind of the most effective, efficient means of getting these done. I love watercolor and digital and would do more of it, but there's no way for me to keep it down to the time limit that I really want to set for myself for these. So,
well, they're glorious, and I still feel like they give a very reminiscent of like a traditional feel for sure.
Yeah, which is part of the goal. Like I didn't want to. That was something important that I didn't want to lose that.
Mm-hmm. So then I guess next is I'm assuming it's another Hobbit one, another spoiler, but it looks like a battle scene.
Yeah. So it's Dane and Azog at the Battle of Moria.
There's a lot of battles in Hobbit. I thought this was gonna be like a fun little adventure. Clearly, I'm like way off on what I was expecting from the Hobbit.
Well, so this is actually from the Silmarillion, but it's the same place. The Moria is the place from the Hobbit. So. And of course from Lord of the Rings, and so this is sort of one of the precursor battles to all of it. There's a lot of battles in the Silmarillion, and then there's several battles in Lord of the Rings, and then there's one big battle in the Hobbit.
Well then, okay, kind of off question, but then should I read or should I listen to that one first before listening to the Hobbit?
I read the Hobbit, then I read Lord of the Rings, then I read the Silmarillion, and I kind of think that's probably the best way to do it.
Okay.
I think you kind of get the best. I think the Silmarillion it's like the deep cuts, like it's the unreleased tracks from the
the EPs.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's really good, but I think you really need to be invested in the world before you dive into that.
Okay, I will do that then. And the next one I believe is the Moby Dick one.
Yeah. Which won the grand prize from Infected by Art 2 years ago. Once again, done primarily for Patreon, but then also just as a love letter to the original Melville story, which is also one of my favorite audiobooks. I still re-listen to it every now and then because it's just such good writing, very compelling, and an image that I had always wanted to paint. And so it was a lot of fun. I'd had this arrangement, this scene in my mind for years and years and years before I actually painted it.
So then, question, I guess I should have asked you earlier, is this then within the last 5 years you've done this? All the works that we've seen recently?
Yeah, so now we're at 2018. So this is all around 3 years ago.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I see the names in the title.
Yeah. So, starting with the Bog Hoggle, or the Bog Jabberwocky, rather.
Okay. Oh, I love the ghost fish. And actually, this is a great example of you're really smart with different materials and how to render and handle them differently. Because like the skin on the fish, and then the tooth, and then the gem, and the bells, they all have a very similar aesthetic to it, but they're all rendered and handled differently, which I think a lot of artists struggle with when they start to realize metal is rendered differently than leather, let's say.
Which I think is that's something I love doing with these monsters, is just getting a chance to render different textures and elements against one another. Ooh, I think that stuff's so fun.
When you're so good at it that it shines so well. Like in this one, the gem is so clearly isolated as its own like material that it stands out so well.
Yeah, and when I think to get there, you have to tackle stuff like that. You have to kind of make those challenges for yourself and try it. Just mash them up together and use them as a chance to learn those things.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then we have... Oh, no, I can actually read the titles. I think this one's just called Final, though.
Yeah, it's St. George and the Dragon. I don't know why I didn't say, yeah, some of these are simply not titled. But yeah, St. George and the Dragon, another something from high school, a legend from high school that I always wanted to do my own version of. And so, um, uh, again, it was one that I had shown to the Patreon. And I believe this is another one that they had picked for wanting to see. And so I really had a good time with this one. Love doing it. Another image that I had wanted to paint for quite a long time.
I think like, and the more that I'm hearing you talk about your pieces, the more I'm like hearing about, I wanted to do this, so then you went and tackled it. I want more younger artists, especially hearing that, to know that if you really have this like drive or passion to do specific images, like definitely do it, because then you'll have people that resonate with it. Like now, every time I'm moving forward listening to The Hobbit, like your art is now the setting and the playmat for exploring on. So I think if something gets you really excited, go for it at some point. Don't feel like you can't for whatever reason. Or, I mean, I know copyright's such a weird minefield nowadays. But like what you said, it was more of like for yourself. You did this for your own personal ambition, and it's great. I love it so much. So keep that in mind, people that are listening. And then this one is called DH1808.
Yeah, Lair of the Fire Breather.
Oh, yes.
Was it's intentional that it sort of follows the previous one, because it's an inversion. It's seeing it from the other perspective of who's this punk out in my yard right now. Who's this punk making noise out in my yard right now? And was the purpose behind this one. It was just sort of a fun experiment, like something else I'd kind of intellectually found really interesting, that like, what would it look like to see the bold St. George or the Dragon Slayer coming from the other perspective, because now we get to see all the other all of his predecessors who had failed, littered, their bones and armor littered around the cave. So it just seemed like an interesting image, and so it was just a lot of fun. Actually, this was actually oil in digital too.
Oh, this started as oil.
Yeah, I don't do that very often, but this was just something I did that was a little bit different.
Something else I'm noticing as I'm hearing you talk about these things, like you have a love for the actual monsters, like the creatures, and I think that's why your creatures stand out so much, is because there's a genuine like care and affection that you have for them, of like not wanting them to just be like looking like an atypical dragon. Like you're giving them personality, you're giving them attitude, and I think that's why it reads so well when you look at your creatures specifically.
That's always been one of my favorite parts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this one's great too. The graveyard.
So this is actually, I had done a bunch of other stuff for Patreon, and I had a month where I was like, I don't know what to do this month for the classic fantasy illustration for this month. I'm not sure. I've done this and I've done that and all these different things, but what should I do next? What would be the best thing? And so I asked Annie, and so this was actually Annie's art direction.
Really?
This was her. Yeah, this was, I asked her to play art director and just say like, all right, tell me what you think, like, with the tools that I have available to me, like with the whole vibe that I have, with the Justin Gerard look that I tend to go for in illustrations and everything. What do you think I had to do next? And so she played art director, and this was what she described, and I loved it. So this was one that was real fun, collaborating with her on one of these.
God, this is just so rich. Like I haven't personally looked through this one, like all through the different skulls, but like there's such a care to even like teeth. Like even in the bottom left, it looks like some kind of a nose horned, but each of those teeth feel so well rendered and cared for. And I think that's why, your and Annie's work both stand out in terms of like attention to detail everywhere, not just like one area of the painting. It's like everywhere gets the same amount of care and affection. And this one definitely like resonates with that.
Which is always dangerous, because you want to make sure that there's focal points, and
true.
It's difficult, I think, because you just get carried away. Like I think for Annie and I both, like the detail is the part we like the most. For her, she wants to render every little flower and every little leaf, because those are those are the beautiful little moments that you're so invested in. And for me, like, yeah, every little tooth, I like, ooh, this, wouldn't want to be bitten by this one. All we get really into it. And sometimes that can be bad for the image, and you just don't care. You're going to keep going because you love it so much. Another fun tidbit about this image is that every time I post it on Instagram, the number one comment, like, and it's just all the way down the comments, is this guy is a monster. Dragons are people too. This is dragon cruelty. Like, all the way down the entire comment tree are people just hating this dragon slayer, that he's done something horrible.
I'm pretty hard. I'm a pretty hard vegan, but I would never be like, oh, what a horrible. Like, how do we know that these dragons weren't attacking villages? And
right?
There's a lot of presumptions from that.
Yeah. But anyway, I find the comments, I really enjoy it. I love seeing the discussion that ends up coming up about whether he's a good guy or bad guy.
I can see you like toying with them and like responding, just like agitating them even further. That's great.
How does this make you feel?
Oh, and then this is literally what I think of like Hobbit. This is it. Even though I know that this might not even be specifically from it, this is when I first saw this, I was like, well, that has to be the walking tree people. And is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is sort of my version of Treebeard, but it's called Mean Tweets, which at the time I did this in 2016, and it seemed like, or no, 2017, and at the time it was really funny. It's not as funny anymore, the title, but at the time it was very, very funny. And
so
anyway, yeah. But now it's exhausting. But I still love the image. The image was all oil on Belgian linen. For those of you who like oil and would like to dabble in painting a little bit more in it, I really recommend Belgian linen. If you can get portrait grade, it's amazing. It's like painting on like gessoed t-shirt material. It's really nice. So if I'm going to paint in oil, this is typically what I go for.
Maybe like one of those feelings of like, oh, that's right. Like, I'm interviewing someone that is so good at what they do. Like, I'm looking at all like the little brush strokes and like the warmth that the bottom half feels, even in like the shadow part of the leg. I don't know if you've heard me say this yet, but you're really good, Justin.
Thanks.
Then we have the glorious Rose Knight. Once again, the attention to the teeth.
I obviously had a lot of fun with this. And again, getting to play with a lot of different textures, so metals and leaves and flower petals. So that was actually one of the main purposes of this arrangement. Really was like that really nice contrast of velvety flower petals against hard, beaten up, sharp metal. A lot of fun here playing with textures.
I'm starting to see that more and more. A lot of these, especially, I don't know why I didn't pick up on this before, but a lot of especially the creature silhouette ones, a lot of them do play with like different materials in the same image.
Yeah, it was something that I always felt was a weak spot in my work, that when I would look at people like Frazetta or even contemporaries like Donato or Paul Bonner, when I would look at their art, I would just be so enamored by just their attention to detail, that they were just really able to capture all these different kind of textures and fabrics and metals, and it just seemed like I am not doing my homework. Like there's something here that I've like, it just was never part of my education, and I've let it slide, and I really need to stop and go back and focus on this. And so a lot of this series is me really trying to patch some what I felt was some of the gaps in my technical abilities.
I mean, excellent. And this is taking the you can say it.
It's more goth than the Silmarils. So
Silmarils?
The Silmarils.
Silmarils. Okay.
It just means those diamonds that the big guy at the top is that are hovering over his hand. But this is was meant to be sort of a frontispiece for the Silmarillion. And when I originally contrived this image like there was the type and that was in the middle there, and so it's kind of meant to be a two-part image because Morgoth isn't a giant epic god of war sized figure, and Baron and likewise Baron isn't some tiny little gnome or something. Like this is it's a human who fights some other deity, but who's likely seen as roughly humanoid proportions, but it's kind of a montage of elements that are mashed together to make the cover. And I don't do that very often. I pretty rarely do montage stuff. And so this was just kind of me playing with some of the elements within the Silmarillion in a way that I felt were interesting and visually compelling. So, and again, excellent. It's just a love letter to the book and Tolkien's creation.
We have this lovely photo of you and Annie. Justin's like, wait, what?
Yeah, it's got to catch up for a second. I'm still behind.
Well, we'll keep moving forward so you don't even get time to react, because I found a beautiful photo of you and Corey Godby.
Oh, no. Yeah, you found it.
Well, it's just it's really nice when I talk to you and Corey about what, like, I don't even think you might not know this, but at cons, if I talk to Corey, at some point your name will get mentioned. And like the stories that I hear from you talking about him or him talking about you, it's just such a fun little friendship. And I like the idea that you guys traveled a lot. And I really do think after this whole COVID mess is over, I really want to start doing that. And kind of like what you said, just take a bicycle and do from one side of the country to the other. And you'd be surprised with how many like visual images you'll flood your brain with.
Absolutely. Yeah, look at that dapper looking fella.
Yeah. You're still looking dapper, Justin. You're still looking dapper.
I don't know, I'm getting a bit shaggy here.
Yeah. All right, let me move all this away so we got just you. There we go. Okay, I mean, that was a beautiful look at your history, even though I didn't see any like DeviantArt embarrassing pictures, but
there's some, for me, there's some low points in there, but that's nice.
No, you may have taken a trip to Margaritaville, but I still don't think that's that bad. All right, so then moving on with the 10 questions, we have what piece defined your growth and progress from seeing yourself as an amateur artist to more of a professional one? And maybe it was even in that list that we just saw.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I ever truly, and even now, like I still feel like there's gaps, and so I have a hard time seeing the good through all the gaps. And so early on, like, there's that thing where it's like I did that smog image, and I would have to say like, oh, that smog image was like kind of a critical moment where like it's all working, and it felt like I could make this happen. But then of course I did like 3 or 4 images after that completely failed, and so it's hard to say like if there was a particular piece apart from that one that defined anything, because Annie and I both have always kind of said that your best piece is always the next one, whatever you're about to do next. And so I still kind of feel like hopefully the piece that's going to define my growth and progress is going to be the next one. So it's a hard question.
Well, I love that sentiment, because then you don't get too obsessed with what you've already done. And then you can put your attention and your energy toward whatever's next.
Exactly.
So then the next question is there a piece that you have a personal connection? I feel like these questions are so redundant after like having an hour and a half like going through your art, because I feel like you've already answered this, but is there a piece you have a personal connection that stands out amongst the rest as a personal favorite? And I'm assuming it has to be the 5-year-old drawing.
Yeah, the 5-year-old is it. I'm going to always be searching to get back to that level of intellectual depth and emotional honesty and just conceptual, just staggering, earth-shattering wonder that I had as a child that you'll spend your whole life trying to recapture again.
I like that, earth-shattering wonder.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how do you hope people see your work?
I hope they like it. I don't know. That's one of those things where I know art is something that occurs between you and another person, because art, if you're the only soul in the universe, is it really even art? because art is communication, and it involves the correspondence of intellectual concepts between one being and another. And so, I know that there is that. Like, you have to consider that, and more than that, we live in a world that there are commercial demands in order for you to put food on the table, and so you have to be able to be effective at your communication skills. So I know that that's important, and at the same time, I try not to think about it too much, because I find it to be anxiety inducing, because I already kind of see I'm probably the worst possible critic of my own work anyway. And so I am sort of always assuming people are seeing all the holes that I'm seeing in it. And so I try not to think too much about it, because I'm already in sort of probably a dark place when I'm doing any kind of self-analysis for my work. It's that thing where, you get stage fright because you're worried. When you're in a group of people, there's maybe new people there, you get social anxiety because you're, oh, what are they thinking? They're looking at me right now. Oh, what are they thinking? They're probably judging me right now. They probably think my clothes are goofy, my hair's a mess, that I'm real, oh boy, they really think I'm stupid. And they're not. They're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about what they're going to eat later. They're not thinking about you at all. And that's probably the scariest thing of all, is nobody's actually thinking about you. So you can let it go. You don't have to be scared. You don't have to be anxious. Nobody actually cares. Don't worry about it. Just be yourself. Get out there. And so I don't know, I almost don't have an answer to that question, and I kind of just don't think about it. I hope they like it.
Honestly, I think that's the way it kind of should be, because you're right. Then you build up too much pressure and expectation, and then maybe you're doing art that's not even catering to what you want to do anymore.
Which is the worst.
The worst. So then, next question, and this is more especially pertaining now that you have children. I think a lot of people watching may also be in similar shoes, but how do you balance the dual life of running a business and creating art without monetary intention and art purely for yourself? Because I know when I talk to a lot of artists, if they have kids, the business side of the art definitely takes more of like a precedent, because you want to make sure you can afford everything for your family.
Yeah, I mean, I think up until you have kids, I mean, of course, like before you have kids, you may have animals, and you may have a house payment. You may have, other family you have to care for. You may have other demands on you. So I'm not going to belittle that. Like, those are serious things too. But I mean, certainly after you have kids, like now suddenly you can't screw around anymore. And I weirdly, I just found that having kids forced me to be as efficient as possible. And is, that whole thing of like, well, I need to be able to do character design in 5 hours instead of 20 hours now. And so I did find, Annie and I both found that we were actually, after we had kids, in a weird surprise, we were actually producing more work of value than we were producing before that, because we were just screwing around so much less. That said, we had a long time to practice, and so maybe all that screwing around before we had kids was really good, because for instance, every day before I begin my professional work, I might spend an hour doing studies or just warm-up drawings or practice or something, so that you can develop your skills further. Like, that was a good thing to probably have had for the 10 years of my career that I had before I had kids. So
do you not do that much like when you start your work day? Do you just kind of jump into it?
You just jump into it. There's no time. There's just so few hours in a day that I'm not engaged directly with the children. So, what few hours we do have, and Annie and I, we balance it by trading off. So she watches them, or excuse me, I watch them in the morning, and then in the afternoon she takes over, and then she watches them until they go to bed. And so we're both spending a lot of time with them, typically independently, so that the other can get at least a solid 4 hours of work in a day, which is
it's like a beautiful way of parenting, because you've like adapted to the challenge of like, okay, we want to make sure that we give our kids time and enough attention so that they feel like their childhood was not with like a missing parent, but still being able to have time for your passion. I just think you guys have really done a good job at balancing that. At least from what I hear. It could be a mess from what all I know.
It's a mess. But I appreciate that. But it also, the other thing is that I don't want to let anyone think in the chat that we have it figured out, because ever since they were born, it's like every 2 weeks the game changes. And so, we've tried every possible arrangement for, when they were in cribs and when they were crawling, before they were walking, then when they're in their own beds, but then when they're not taking naps. We've had to change everything about our entire layout here and be very flexible, to accommodate this sort of new situation. Then, of course, the pandemic hits and we don't have any childcare, and things change then too. It's just so many dramatic changes that what can you do? And so, yeah, I don't want anybody to think that we've got it figured out, because every time that we've given a lecture or a presentation at DragonCon or a convention somewhere and said, we are artists and we've had kids and we made it work, and here, we'll tell you how we did it. Every time we've gone home, and like the next day the kids are like, well, we're not taking naps anymore, or they're just hopping out of their cribs now. And it's like, all right, well, we don't have cribs anymore. Now what are we going to do? And it's, the game just keeps changing. And so I don't want to make it sound like we've got it figured out, but right now that's how we're balancing things.
Well, what do you feel was like the most recent wrench that they threw your way?
Well, this week it's that we got them bunk bed fort, and they're twins. So of course, there's no way to get one to be cool with sleeping on the bottom and one cool with sleeping on the top. Mm-hmm. Both got to sleep on the top, which means that nobody sleeps. So that's the new wrench.
Wait, so now they're just both in the top bunk?
Yeah, so predictably enough, nobody sleeps.
Because they're just messing around, like punching each other throughout the night.
Yeah. And then there's also the classic blunder of, hey, we've figured out how to live in the pandemic with toddlers. We've figured out how to have a nice existence, and everybody, we've got our days scheduled out right. Everything's working just fine here in the pandemic. Let's get a puppy, which is
I knew that
pandemic blunder.
Did you get a new one?
We did. We got a.
Is it the pug?
Yeah, a little Frenchie, little French bulldog named Olive, who's bucket puppy on the stream. She's a maniac, and we love her to pieces. But it's one of those things where, like, whatever you thought was, suddenly there's a lot of new chores that have to be done now that you have.
That one feels more like self-inflicted.
It is.
Actually, that is nuts that its name is Olive, because our cat original name was Olive, and like I was going to get another cat to like give our first cat like a playmate to play with throughout the day, and I really wanted a black cat, and I wanted to name him Oil so that we have Olive and Oil. But everyone tells me it's like the worst name ever, so I'm like, okay, I'll think of something else.
Yeah,
but it is interesting. Yeah, I love the name Olive. It's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, how do you overcome any art blocks that come your way?
I don't have any art blocks, and I have not had any for just a decade now. I think.
Oh, you're serious? Really?
Yeah, like neither Annie and I, and certainly not since we have had kids. And I think a lot of that is having passions, having specific goals that you want to achieve in your art career, ideas that you want to do, and writing them down, and just keeping a really solid list of projects you want to tackle, things that you want to paint, projects you want to undertake, books you'd love to illustrate, just art that you want to make. What's the thing that you actually want to be remembered for, or to share with people, or that you think the world needs right now? Or that you just want to do your own version of, or that you need to make a love letter to whatever that thing is. Like, you as an artist should probably have a very long list of those things, and you should keep them written down, keep them in sketchbooks. And then anytime you're suddenly like, hey, I'm in between client jobs, I suddenly have free time to pursue my own things. You should be digging those books out and just tackling the thing that seems most exciting at that moment. And so, yeah, Andy and I, it's not a matter of having a block. It's a matter of which of the thousands of projects out there that we could do is the one that's most sensible to tackle right now.
Oh, I love that. I mean, normally when I hear people, say they're in an art block, usually the way that I always interpreted it is they're not enjoying what they're doing, and that like maybe they should switch gears.
Yeah, and early on, I think there's a sense of not self-importance, but like wanting to do work that feels important. And so people dismiss art that they actually care about, even if it's like I wanted to do my own fan art of all the Marvel characters or something, but that's not important. What would be important would be, whatever, some kind of installation art or something that they think might get them into some kind of upper New York gallery somewhere that would, their parents would then respect them, or some weird thing like that, where
Yeah.
they're kind of hung up on that thing. And yeah, you'll have artist block then, because who's going to know that stuff? Who cares either? If that's not really where your heart is. If what your actual goal is impressing somebody or earning the respect of somebody or feeling like you're a serious artist or something, like, I can see you having artist block in those situations, because those are difficult goals to achieve, and also I think unfulfilling goals to achieve.
Yeah.
Whereas there probably is something more, possibly pedestrian, but there's probably something simpler that really speaks to both you and your group of friends, your actual support group in wherever you are in life right now. There's something they would probably love from you. There's something you would love to do, and you should be doing that. And if you ever do get to that point where you're doing very serious gallery art, it should be a natural extension of those things, not you finding something self-important to go off and feel like a legitimate artist who belongs at the Met or something. Like, that should not be what we're hung up on.
Oh, that was great. No, I totally agree. So then moving to the next question is, how is art defined who you've become?
Man, that's one of those ones where it's like I would not be able to tell you without kind of seeing what I might have become other than art. It's impossible for me to know. I cannot imagine life going any other direction.
Like, do you have any alternative realities or other paths? Like, oh, well, maybe I'm into this. I wonder what would happen if I went down that path.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there was buddies of mine that were going to join the Army in high school and wanted to be Navy SEALs, and we used to run around and break into buildings in the middle of the night and try and do raids and missions and all kinds of. And we made bombs and stuff now that would like schools would lock us up because they'd be alarmed at the behavior. But then it was like we really thought we were going to one day join the Army and go off to be Navy SEAls. And then I ended up moving away and going off to school and becoming an artist, and they actually all did become Navy SEAls.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so there is that sense of like, what might that have looked like? I don't know. I don't think about
different.
It. Certainly, it'd have been way different, but I don't think about it too much. I think had I done that, I'd have always wondered what could I have done if I'd have chosen this path.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, because you don't probably think about it, there's no regret there. I always think that when people are thinking about something in their past too much, it's because they regret it on some level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is terrible. Always fear regret more than failure. Just go do the thing you want to.
Wait, say that again. What was that quote?
Always fear regret more than failure.
Oh, that's a good one. There's certain quotes that like I write down on my whiteboard from all these artist interviews, and that one's solid.
Right
on. So the next question is, what is the best? And for those of you that are in the chat still asking questions, there's 2 left, and then I'll get to your guys' questions. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. But the next question is, what is the best art advice to an artist, or not even art advice, just advice in general, to an artist just starting out, and then also to an artist struggling with where they're at?
So starting out, it's going to be a long road. The most important thing I think you can do is find something you really love doing, even again, if it's not like important art, but just draw to the best of your ability the thing that you love. And the thing that keeps you engaged in it and happy, and that helps you communicate whatever it is that's inside you, whatever the thing is that's in your soul that you want to share with other people, whatever that thing is, even if you're drawing it poorly, just draw it. And then while you're doing that, be prepared to spend a couple hours every day just drawing from life. And you should be doing both of those hand in hand as you move forward. The hard knuckle push-ups of drawing from life, while at the same time not losing your soul, that core part of you that it's like, if it won't matter if you do learn how to paint flawlessly better than a camera, it won't matter if you have nothing worth sharing. And so I think that you kind of need both of those things. You need something that's exciting to you, and something worth sharing with other people, and also that you're able to share it with other people. So that's what I would suggest to people starting out. Keep that vision in mind. And then for those struggling with where they are at, join the club. I mean, we're all here. This is none of us are probably where we want to be. I think the best thing you can do is healthy self-analysis. Look at the work of yours that's been successful and the work that's failed, and try and figure out what it is that's made the work that does work good. Lean into that, and then try and rip out all the stuff that's no good. Burn it all. Don't be afraid to murder your darlings. If it's not working, get rid of it. And if you know you have gaps in your technique, if there's things that are stopping you, go learn it. Get out there.
God, I love that. I ever since you told me about this burning old art theory, I'm like, I one day will adopt it. I'm not brave enough yet. Who knows? Maybe at the end of this year I'll find it. But I'm curious if you've ever had this moment, because I feel like I had it mid-October, where I actually did feel like I'm exactly where I was meant to be. Like, I liked where I was with like my connections with my family and my friends, and I was enjoying the work I was doing, and then I was just enjoying waking up and like going through my day to day. Like, do you have that often in, I guess, your own life?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and it comes and goes. Based on, it's like, we finally got this whole pandemic thing figured out. Life is really nice. I'm loving being here with my family. Let's get a dog.
Yeah.
And but no, I mean, it comes and goes. Life, you typically do end up in a really good place where you finally have kind of life going how you want it. You're pursuing the thing that makes you happy. The people around you are pursuing the things that make them happy, and everybody's having a good time. And then you add some new wrinkle into it, like having kids. And now you have to adapt to this new reality and find a way to make that work as well. I think it's healthy. It's how we grow. So, but I think that comes and goes, and I think it's healthy that it comes and goes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You can't just always be on like a high. It needs a pendulum swing, or else the highs wouldn't feel like highs anymore.
Yeah, you would never be inclined to grow. I think
Yeah.
Greatness only comes from adversity. Like you just won't be. What's the purpose of moving forward if you've got everything you need? You have the risk of peaking in high school, essentially. Like, got it all figured out. You're the high school quarterback. Why would I need to do anything else? Why would I need to better myself? I am the top. And so yeah, I do think it's good that, like, you need those moments of light. The universe is at perfection. We've achieved Zen, but then you also need the chaos to occasionally, in order for progress to occur.
God,
Destabilization.
I agree with that so much. And like, I don't think someone should be like perpetually in chaos, because I think you're right. It has to like rise above it and then find the next one, and like it keeps going in that direction. But I do think I don't know for you, but definitely like lingering in your sad moments in life, like after a breakup or something, it's really easy to create art because you're very emotionally attached to like that feeling, and then putting it down on paper, it's so easy. And I always call it Adeling it, because then you turn your sorrows into treasured gold. But I like the idea though of, even when you're happy or like in a good place in your life, finding how to create without relying on like that easy emotion to go back on, or to like lean into.
Yeah. That's tough.
It is difficult.
Yeah, Adeling yourself. That's a good phrase. I like that.
Well, I always like, people always talk about how like their their hardships or whatever, but I'm like, but that's what you're gonna Adele someday. Like, you don't even know it yet.
And it's good. Those hardships, you'll be able to communicate with other people who've gone through that. It's broadened your human experience. I think it's
it's great. Okay, my last of my 10 questions are: what advice would you give about being authentic in your work?
So that's a really tough one, because obviously I push a lot of people who take classes for me or mentorships with me. I always push them to be doing passion projects, that they should be filling out a sketchbook, like like the little one that I have here. I've got dozens of these that are just filled with tons of little ink drawings of all the things that I want to do, that I want to paint. And and even as I go through audiobooks, like as I read audiobooks, I sometimes pause it and scribble out a scene idea. I think one of the best things you can do is know those things that you want. I do think that's part of what keeps you honest and passionate and authentic in your work. However, there's just the reality that we have to make money. And as much as it would be nice to be able to just do only our art for ourselves and to be completely self-indulgent, I do think there's something where you do need to make that Venn diagram of what does the world, maybe it's even a 3-part Venn diagram of what does the world need right now, what is the world willing to pay me for right now, and what do I want to do right now. And that narrow, tiny space in between those 3 things is probably what you need to be leaning into. Yeah. And so if you can find that, that's great. Most of the time you can only find something in 2 of the 3 circles. But if you can find that that tiny space there, you've done something magical. And I think that's a really good thing to do. But if you've got to make money and Margaritaville is the only one paying you right now, it's coming up. Like Shakespeare got to get paid. You got to make that money. And in those situations, I think here's how to survive. This is the big takeaway is cynically use those projects as opportunities to improve skills that you will use to later on use in your projects that are part of your passion. So in the industrial kitchen appliances, I'm going to be rendering a lot of metal. And hey, I want to be able to paint the once and future king, images from the once and future king of King Arthur and the Round Table. Going to be a lot of knights. I'm going to learn how to paint banged up metal and I'm focusing in my mind on that I want to be able to use this on knightly armor in some glorious battle epic scene later on. And that's how I'm going to be approaching this project, so that it's not a complete loss and that I'm not engaged in some soul crushing poisonous endeavor. So that's my advice.
Oh, that's great. So now is the chance where I open up the floor to the people watching, and I had some questions from Instagram that clearly we have a lot of questions though, so I'll try to narrow it down because I don't want to take your next 7 hours from you. So we'll get to as many as we can. And a lot of these you kind of answered. Like one of them was, how old are you? And actually, the one that I wanted to ask you about, because Corey Godby actually messaged me and he said, ask him about Samurai Hamster.
Oh, no.
Samurai
Hamster. Now here's the thing. Samurai Hamster, good idea. All right. And Corey's there. Corey knows. Corey and I were working together at the time, and Corey knows Samurai Hamster was a good idea. And we pitched it to some people. And then a couple months later, we saw that people were making a movie called Kung Fu Panda and that Jack Black was on board. And when we looked at it, we were like, that was our idea, only ours was a hamster. Somebody took our idea.
So I'm assuming from the context is so then you and Corey created the Samurai Hamster legend.
Well, I created it. Corey actually was creating his own stories back then. And so I think we had pitched some of his as well. One of them was called The Blue Goblet. And then another one, I think he's actually doing as a Patreon thing right now. Can't remember the name of it. You'll have to ask him. But everybody go check out Corey Godby's Patreon. He's a dynamite artist. And there's a story he was working on while I was working on my own stories. And Samurai Hamster was one of them. And I don't care. That was a good idea. Jack Black stole it from me. And he did a great job. And I hate that he did such a good job and he made such a cool, fun movie.
I mean, do you still have somewhere in your archive sketches of the Samurai Hamster?
Yeah, it's you could, if you look up Justin Gerard and Samurai Hamster right now on Google Images, you'd probably the cover piece for it, which has some little dragons and some white field mice and a samurai hamster, is probably out there. So I would assume. I don't know. Let me see what happens when I.
Weirdly, I'm finding it on Pinterest, I believe.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I'm not seeing it. Oh, it's gone then. They've scraped it from the internet.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna pull it up on the big screen over here. Is it this one where it looks
Oh,
like
here it is.
a couple of
Pinterest. Yeah.
traveling hamsters, and then
Yeah,
there's like, yeah,
that's the one. Yeah.
yeah. Ah. I mean, it to me it reads very Justin Gerard, especially with like the little dragon creatures and the very long, narrow eyes.
Yeah. So that was the original sales pitch piece for Samurai Hamster. And thank you, Colton Ackerman, for uploading that and keeping it in the world.
Right?
I was disappointed that nobody bought it. Nobody wanted. I thought this was a great idea, and there was just no takers. So we couldn't sell it. We couldn't sell our film, and I think it's because of the weakness, just the profound weakness of my writing. I was not a very good writer, and I had tried to put my own story together, and we actually teamed up. A production company who was interested in it teamed me up with some writers in LA, and we could not make it work into a pitch that I was happy with and that they were happy with, and so we didn't go anywhere with it. And then Kung Fu Panda came out, and it's just what on earth? It's just you're
I mean,
kidding me.
You got pretty far with it. This wasn't just like some random sketch on a napkin. This was like, no, you legit were getting ready to pitch it.
Yeah, they stole it from us.
Right under
No,
you.
they did a way better job with it. They killed it. Kung Fu Panda is a great series, and good on them.
I like that you're able to like still have respect. And you're like, even though that's very similar to my idea, I tip my hat to you, sir.
As soon as I saw the Jack Black animated intro, the 2D animated intro, I was like, all right, they win. I don't think they did steal it. They did a better job than I did, and I can at least, I can let it go when I see that somebody's done. The world is a better place now for this idea being out there, the format that it is. I can let it go.
Yeah. So getting into our next question, we have it from Luca. It says, how do you figure out the anatomy for your dragons?
Oh, the best way to do that is just to do a lot of studies of actual real world creatures, especially creatures that creep you out. So if there are creatures that in the way they move seem to have a sense of dragonness to them, of something in the slither or the way that they like flop their lizardy claws as they scrabble over the rocks. If you find something like that, I think just do studies of it, and then mash up a bunch of different creatures that capture that essence for you, and that's the best thing. If you want to come hang out with us, we do Let's Draw Monsters the first Wednesday of every month, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on my Twitch channel, and we do this precise thing where whatever the monsters are, we do life drawings of the various creatures involved, and then go forth and try and then mash them up into this thing.
Really?
It's a fun little thing we do. It's a budget version of Ian McCaig's demos. We love Ian McCaig, big fan of it. We've done demos with him in the past, but it's just that basic kind of creature design mentality. Which, if you want a really good version of it, check out Ian McCaig's Gnomon workshop videos, where he describes his monster making process.
Is that the one with the mermaid on the cover?
That's it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's a really solid one. Yeah. Ian McCaig, genius. He's just top tier.
So you say this is the first Wednesday of every month. So like December 2nd, you'll be doing your next one?
Yeah, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
I'm going to write this one down because I am curious to join in on one of these.
It's a good one this time.
Is it like a secret, or do you announce it early?
It's a secret, though. Somebody in the Twitch chat came up with the idea yesterday, in our stream yesterday. You probably know who you are if you're watching this. But yeah, somebody came up with a hilarious name, and it's probably going to be that. It's really good. So some of them end up being a little bit thematic. So this month was the Zombuk, which was a leftover from Halloween. And then the actual October one was the Hampire, which was a vampire pig, as you might guess.
That one I would have done. Oh, that one's perfect.
Yeah, they sometimes follow a certain holiday theme. So you'll be able to Christmases won't be too big a surprise, but I still think it's a really fun one. So we'll be mashing up some creatures for that.
And you say 5 p.m. Oh, Eastern
5 p.m.
time.
Eastern Standard Time. Yeah.
Nope, that's not my time. I gotta change that on my calendar. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I will join you for that. So the next question is from Lincoln and says, how do you create pieces with personality, something that has a feeling to it?
Some advice that Thomas Fluharty gave me early on was have a mirror next to your desk and make faces in it. And I don't have a mirror next to my desk, but I do have photo booth. And so I will occasionally just turn photo booth on and make wacky expressions. And then, and people have seen some of those on our Patreon when I've just shared what some of my actual facial expression reference is. But yeah, I think that's kind of one of the best ways of doing it is either you doing it yourself, or if you have somebody in your household who you can get to do fun expressions. That's the way to do it. I think it's one of the best ways of doing it.
Oh God, I can't believe you even brought that up, because photo booth, I have had such a horrible experience because I do the same thing where I take photo reference of myself, but usually it's like anatomy stuff. I'm not like full nude or anything. I mean, some of them, but I don't I'll delete those right away. But let's just say one of my friends opened up photo booth because they wanted to prank me and like have a bunch of like silly photos on it, and it's just like a bunch of pictures of myself like doing different weird poses or like doing. And they're like, Tim, what are you doing? I was like, oh no, that's my reference collection. I swear, it was so uncomfortable.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the things that I think with all artists, that it's like we all are going to have like if I'm in our will, like burn my hard drive, because we all probably do the same thing. Just if you have a quick anatomy problem, like, well, probably just gonna take some really awkward shots here. Mm-hmm. Sure hope I haven't left the OBS up or anything weird.
I mean, I've learned to now delete all my photo booth or any photos on my phone because I'm like, I never want that experience again. That was so awful. So the next one's from actually a girl I know. She's really wonderful. And Sean says, are Justin's values all laid out with pencil or powdered graphite before color is added digitally?
Pencil. So my favorite pencil is I think you and I have actually talked about this before, but the old Kimberly's.
Mm-hmm. That's what I use.
Excellent pencil. So love using that. And then my absolute favorite of all time is the Staedtler 925. See, I don't know if my camera will focus on that. I guess it won't.
There we go.
Staedtler 925. It's a 5mm mechanical. Finest mechanical pencil on the planet for the money. Big fan of it. Anybody in the chat telling you that a Graph Gear 1000 is better needs to get out. They don't know what they're talking about. It's a garbage pencil. Staedtler 925, finest in the world. Before I go into digital, I always do that. And previously, I was using colored pencil. Caran d'Ache Pablos are some of my very favorites for working with watercolor. But right now, it's all pencil. I don't use powdered graphite much because I make too much of a mess if I try and use that sort of stuff.
I try to pretend like I'm not intimidated by it, but every time I pull it out and like whip it down, I'm like, oh God, like gently pushing it. I'm like, oh, this is why I use pencils, because I'm not a very good messy artist. But I was curious though, when you do your shadow areas, will you block off with like a dark value, or do you leave that for digital, like knowing, okay, I'm going to put a dark value here?
So this is one we did on stream, and actually speaking of the
I saw this on Instagram.
Yeah. So speaking of that, this is on that hot press paper actually that I was talking about. So this is on that, the Arches watercolor paper. And so, you can see the darks in there. So most of them would be at a lighter level of depth. And I'll go in, you're probably familiar with these too, but the old General's layout, which is kind of like a 4B, maybe a 5B, I don't know, in darkness. So I will go in afterwards, after I've kind of shaded in with that 2H and I know where my shadow areas are. I'll sometimes go in with the darker one and actually just punch in those heavy darks. But I rarely go over a 4B. I don't use charcoal. I don't use anything that's carbon or anything like that. You get too dark, and I think it kills those nice subtleties in your lights. Especially if you started with like a 2H, you're just obliterating all that fine work. And so I tend to leave a lot of that, and then take it into Photoshop and punch up the levels if I need that. But I honestly I prefer painting over a very light drawing. So I find these perfect.
I totally agree. I tell people I rarely go above a 2B, and most of my drawings are like 70% a 2H, and then I'll switch to an H or a HB, and then I'll end with a 2B. So they're like, it's not a big range.
That's where it's at right there. It's a good arrangement right there.
Actually, it was cute when you posted that image on Instagram. I got giddy because the little stovepipe character, I actually have the original of that.
Oh, you got that one. That's right.
I do.
Stovepipe Hero.
So it was like this reoccurring character. I was like, I have this drawing. It was cute.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's part of those monsters, but now these are sort of the heroic characters, the little unlikely heroes who are going to fight all those monsters. So
it's been a long time.
Yeah, that finally the teacup the stovepipe hero has he's got a backstory now on the whole 9 yards. So that's awesome. You have that one.
Oh yeah. Well, because you sell it for what, like $3 at con, so I was like, I'll definitely pick it up.
Yeah, well, my prices have gone up to about $350 now, but it is.
Well, inflation. Yeah, you got to keep up with the times.
Yeah, you got to keep up with it. Yeah.
Yeah. This one's actually from Sean Price, and he says it's just hard. Well, it's actually not more of a question; it's more of a statement. But he says it's just hard not to be grateful for Justin's work and advice. The time spent during the mentorship with Justin led to a super enlightening moment in my work, and I just want to say thanks.
Oh, hey, I am so glad to hear that, man.
Well, and actually, for the people watching, they should know that. Yeah, do you still offer it? You do this mentorship every other month, I believe it was.
We do. We're kind of booked out now for a few months, probably. But yes, we do. Yeah, we do mentorships. I had not expected it to kind of grow to the level that it's at now, and now I'm kind of sort of like, I may need to change the format or something for a class situation, but yeah, we do mentorships on the Patreon as well, which has been it's been a lot of fun. Finally, a chance to kind of give back in a more formal way to the art community.
Well, I assume it's your highest tier on Patreon, so it's about $9-10 for the entire month.
yeah, and daily feedback and just it's me. I'll just be on a window next to you, just. cheerleading for you. That's
the whole time, just like waiting for you to talk to you, just like that's it. So the next one is it's Roman, and they said, how does the process of making your art looks like from sketch to finished piece? I know we've kind of seen it throughout this interview, really, but do you have like one set kind of efficient way of, okay, this to this to this to this, and then done? Because I guess it really is like the pen thumbnails and then pencil sketch and then digital and then final.
Let me see if I just type it in, what will show up. Oh, okay. So if you type in Justin Gerard process into just a Google image, there's one called I think it's the 6th entry is Making Monsters on Muddy Colors.
Yes.
There's another one from.
Oh yeah, let me pull this over here.
Yeah, there's one a few down for AluxCon 2017, but one of them is my oil process, and the other is the process that I use with the monsters. And I tend to do process guides like this every month on Patreon. So if you like this kind of thing, please do give the Patreon a look. So this is ArtStation too.
Oh, is this not even the right one?
No, but that's pretty cool. I didn't. Let me.
Hold on. Let me type in Muddy Colors after this. And your Patreon's one of those where, I mean, a lot of artists have Patreons, but you're one of the few that actually will like update it every single month with new stuff. And I mean, sometimes like you and Annie, you update it like every other day. I'm like, Man, they are really good at doing their Patreon.
I just dropped a link into the Hangouts chat,
Oh, okay, yes. Let me look at
and so
that
there's
instead.
in that article. If you scroll down, you'll see one that has like sort of the sequences of going from ink thumbnail to pencil drawing to flat fill to shadow layers, then lighting, and then sort of color work, and then did it not send the right one?
Ah! I feel like we're showing our age with, oh yeah, the technology and computer.
All right, I'm gonna. That is okay. You're in the right one. Yeah,
Oh,
scroll
this
down.
is the right one.
You should see one. There it is. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm just behind. I'm 10 seconds behind. So
that's right. Okay, so it's on the Muddy Colors. It's called Making Monsters.
Yeah,
Because you
you've
do
got
have
it
one
right.
of the images that it's the illustration process of the Bog
That's it.
Jabberwocky.
That's it. That's the one. You've got it. Yeah, and that's the link that I just sent is the same thing. So, but yeah, that gives a basic overview of the method. And again, there's on the Patreon we put a bunch of these. There's dozens of them now, I guess, but we there's usually one every month. And if we don't do one of these, we do like a GIF animatic that gives you the start to finish of the monster.
I didn't know you do your lights with color dodge.
I don't always. Sometimes
okay.
I use, but I find that color dodge is a bit harsh. It's a bit too, you risk burning the image out, but it's good. It works.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do prefer screen.
Wait, hold on. I gotta find how to pull you back up. Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh. I swear I'm one of the most incompetent with technology. It's amazing that I can actually manage to do a live stream. I have no idea how to get this done every time. There we go. Okay, you're back. All right. So then, I mean, actually, that's great. I'm gonna actually look into your page. I kind of want to do the Hampire. Like, and now I'm seeing this giant pig flag, but maybe I'll like follow your process, see if I can create something worthy of.
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it.
So the next question is from Solenini. Says, how do you choose your color palette? Do you test it, and do you use one of them often?
So I do sometimes do color comps, typically only for the bigger scenes. Otherwise, I am sort of intuiting my way through the image. So for like in the Bog Jabberwocky one that we just posted, I knew that I wanted it to have those sort of red sails on its back, and that they'd be a little bit pinkish, reddish, sort of look like something aquatic. And then it's sort of like, well, what's a good color that would complement that? Okay, so this sort of rich blue, aqua blue kind of looks good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's another sort of color that goes with those two colors? Okay, so the sort of pale yellow peach, is a kind of good neutral that feels like a split complementary arrangement. So I'm kind of, most of the time, I'm just intuiting my way through it. But with the big scenes, I do tend to develop an actual color comp and then pick from that as well. But I actually don't think I'm that good at color. I really struggle. I'm much more at home in monochrome. Much of what I do, I'm really invested in getting that monochrome down. And then I kind of feel like if you've nailed the monochrome, like the color it's going to sort itself out. If you've really got your value arrangements correct, it's hard to screw them up that badly. So I tend to prefer, just so long as I can hit that, I feel good about it.
I mean, you're being very, very subtle about your color. I think you're excellent. And if there was like one color I would say I do see reappear a lot, it's like this icy blue, and it's usually in like highlights or like hot spots, or it's almost like a teal. Or sometimes I think you do an excellent job with like the minimal colors, because I think you're smart a lot with knowing that like if 90% of your image is this color, that 10%, whatever it is, it's going to stand out more than the 90% out because it's so isolated. And even like I think of your ghost fish and the little red pink gem. I mean, it stands out so much. And then you have like little highlights like on the inside of the lip, and it's the same like little pinky. And you lace it throughout. Like, you're really good with color use. So whenever I hear you talking about your own color, I'm like, yeah, no, you know what you're doing, and it's excellent.
Ah, well, thanks.
So humble, so humble. Okay, the next one we got. So I guess, yeah, this was from Morpho, and I know you kind of answered it, but I don't know if you do have a general sense of how much time do you spend on a piece in general nowadays?
So the monsters, I'm probably averaging more like 7 hours per monster, and that's like an hour and a half to 2 hours in the drawing, and then 5 to 6 in the color. And then for paintings, it's typically longer. And again, this is all for just me playing my own art director. So for the paintings, it might be 10 days for an average painting. Like the Scorpion, I think we did the Scorpion battle recently on Twitch, and that was 7 or 8 actual Twitch streams, each around 3 hours long. So that's 21 hours just there. And I did a lot of work off stream. So I mean, that whole image was probably 40, 50 hours of actual work when it was all said and done. It took a long, long time. And that's fairly normal for the bigger scenes. So yeah, something like that. I hope that kind of helps.
I mean, I definitely lurked on a lot of your Score Pumpkin streams.
Oh, cool.
And just from doing a lot of streams in the past myself, I do feel like I go a little slower because answering questions, like, it doesn't break my concentration fully, but I do notice like my pencil goes a little slower, or like I'll spend more time rendering an area that doesn't even need it anymore. So like what could have been in that giant illustration you did, you could have probably easily shaved some of the time, just from, I know how difficult it is sometimes streaming and drawing. And
Oh, you're absolutely right. You may be talking about this specifically, but like if I look away from the thing to look at chat and look back, I will have forgotten where I was in the scene.
Yes.
And I just start working on something unrelated. And people in the chat who just heard me say, like, all right, now we're going to finish this leaf here. And then I look at something in the chat and I come back and painting the sky. They're probably just like, what is this guy doing?
The worst part is when you like look at the chat, you answer a question, then you look back down, and then you don't like the proportions of something you've drawn, or like you're like, oh no, like I either have to fix this on stream, or I have to awkwardly like push through it. Oh, I hate that feeling so much.
Yeah, that hot feeling of embarrassment. I hate that.
And you're like, oh no, I've been drawing this for an hour and a half, and clearly the eye is like too far up or something, and I haven't noticed it,
I tend to yell at myself on stream too. Like, you've been drawing for 20 years and you can't manage a leg? How could you have forgotten how to draw a leg?
Yep.
So that's the worst.
I feel that for sure. The next question is from Anthony and says, I'm having trouble finding the motivation to do my art while working a full-time job to support myself. Any advice?
So there's no two ways about it. That's really tough. And especially, I think, if your work is like tangentially related to art. So if you're doing graphic design or web design or something, and it's, and you're kind of like using some of your artistic or communication skills during your day, like it's sapping a lot of that creativity, a lot of that soul out of what you might like have the energy to do when you get home. And there's just no two ways about it, especially if you have children, a family that you now are spending time with when you come home. That is a really tough problem. And it's not one that I think there are easy answers out of. For me, before I was able to go full-time in art, I did part-time work, but I wasn't taking care of a family. I didn't have kids at the time, so I could afford to spend 3 days of my week doing part-time roofing. And then the other 4 days of my week really focused on building my portfolio. But, had I children at the time, it's quite possible I would have simply had to spend more like 5 days doing the roofing and then only 2 days, doing what art that I could. And the likelihood that I'd been able to go professional at that point, it diminishes dramatically. That said, I think it's important to know, like, you don't have to see this as a moneymaker. One of the worst things you can do if you have a hobby, something that brings you joy in your life that you really love, one of the worst things you can do with it is try and monetize it. Sometimes, like, if you really just like something, just do it when you can. Do it when, it's a way to relax and to unwind, or you're watching TV. And so you just pull out a sketch pad and draw while you're watching. I think maybe if you do have a full-time job and there's kind of no way to get out of that full-time job because you're in a situation where you have to have it, I think finding a way to make art something that's a healthy experience for you, a fun experience for you, and not a stressful one is probably more important. And then you just see where life takes you. See if it does allow you later on to quit that full-time work, go part-time somewhere else, and then lean into a little more hard art education so that you can build out a portfolio. But again, I want to caution everybody, like, you don't have to make this a career to enjoy it, or for it to be a meaningful thing, or for it even to be your identity or your group. Like, I know a lot of people they feel like, I want to be part of the art community. I want to be, I want approval and affection and association, and I'm going to find that in the art community. I think that's a disastrous thing, because artists, especially in this community, the imaginative realism community, there's not a very high bar for us to want to hang out, like, or to enjoy having you here. Like, you don't have to be an award winner or anything.
It's not
like,
a high bar.
Most of us just like talking about like Tolkien and the Mandalorian and whatever. Like, you don't have to be some genius to be a part of this. And even if you're doing art that's just, it's what you really love, and it's not very good, but it's what you love, like, we will probably all still enjoy looking at it and talking with you about it. And so I think just that's the big thing is, like, if your life doesn't accommodate going full-time in art, don't try and kill yourself and potentially, wreck your family situation over it. But that's a tough problem.
So I heard you mention that you were a roofer, and I noticed my roof's getting a little old. Can I get a number for you to possibly, bring back the roofing supplies?
Sure. Yeah, it's been 20 years since I've done any roofing, and it's not like riding a bike. I won't pick it right up, and that roof, I got bad news for you about that roof.
It'll be worse than before you came.
It's going to be far worse.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know you were a roofer. I mean, that's like legit hard work.
Yeah, in South Carolina too. Brutal summers there.
But, I forgot about that. You're on like hard blacktop roofs for the most part, I assume. Yeah. Doing this labor.
Misery. And I try and tell people that it's really good to do something that's sort of diametrically opposed and miserable to art. If you can, whatever you do, don't pick up a cushy job, and don't pick up a graphic design job if you're getting started and you think you want to be in illustration, because you're not leaving that graphic design job if you get it. They're going to pay you really well. It's a nice cushy life, and you're not getting out of it. Once you'll have kids, you'll found roots, and there's no spouse in the world that's going to be cool with you suddenly stopping that nice cozy $60,000 a year graphic design job to go in for illustration for maybe 15 or 20, and they don't pay the same. Graphic design, if you can get that job, is it's going to be a more stable career if you can get in. I find most of the people would report it being a little less rewarding, but more financially stable. And yeah, if you want to actually make it, get yourself something that's miserable.
Like, what's funny is, like, I think about this too, because the job I had throughout college was I shucked oysters, and it was every day I would be there like for 4 or 5 hours. I would shuck oysters with a metal glove, and then at the end I had to bleach and clean all 3 of our sinks, and it was like the worst job possible. But looking back on it, I have this weird nostalgia for it, because at the restaurant, it was this giant seafood restaurant, and you had to work your way up. So me starting at the oyster shucker station, I then earned my status as being a sushi boy. So I was sushi boy for like 6 months, and I earned my reputation by doing such a good job decorating sushi plates that I became the cake decorator. And like, I remember being really proud of myself for like starting at oyster shucker and then making my way to cake decorator. But I mean, it was sucky work, admittedly. But looking back, I actually look back on it very fondly, because I agree with you. You need a job that like is so opposite of art, and it's kind of like hard manual labor. Because now I appreciate so much the people, like my brother's a construction worker, and I think about him waking up at 4 a.m. every day, and he pours cement and he does all this other stuff. I'm like, I'm so glad there's people out there that can do that, because then I have the ability to just draw pretty pictures in the comfort of my own home, and I feel very, very privileged and happy about it. So I do agree with you. I think everyone needs a really crappy job.
Yeah.
To appreciate what they have.
Yeah. And you don't want your plan B to be your plan A in the end. Like, you want something that you're not going to want to be your life. So it's good. And that sounds perfect. Oyster shucker, that's
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that's you're going to end up becoming a professional artist. You're not going to be, you don't picture yourself at 45, still being an oyster shucker, like that's
No.
the kind of thing you want. And there was other guys on the roofing team that were 45 and would just tell me every single day, like, don't be 45 and still be roofing.
Oh,
And
really?
that's the kind of thing that will keep you working real hard.
Yeah. I do have to admit though, I did get a little prideful of how good I got at shucking oysters. There was at one point I was teaching the like newcomers on how to do it, and I was like, oh, I felt like such a professional. I was like, oh yeah, you stick the knife right in this part of the oyster and you twist. You don't turn. I was like, I was very confident in my ability to shuck oysters, but yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
wouldn't want to do that forever.
that's something where there's a little physicality involved. Like
Yep.
you're doing something, you're moving around, you're getting the blood flowing. Like that, you feel good at the end of the day. You've accomplished something. You're feeding human beings. Roofing, you're putting a roof on something. There's a sense of accomplishment there.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And I think as a counterpoint to art, which is inherently useless, is anything other than communication. It's not holding up the walls. It's not providing sustenance. Like it's kind of nice
Uh-huh.
to have a bit of a balance that keeps you grounded in reality. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have a part-time job, I liked it.
And I don't know if this is true for you, but I also feel like it made me appreciate and respect people more. Like especially when I go to Subway, I'm like I go there at least once a week, and I'm always very attentive to like talking with them and engaging in conversation because I know what it's like being behind a food station bar, and it's horrible at times. And just having like a familiar face to brighten up your day, I think it did change the way I look at like different industries for sure.
Oh yeah, I definitely want my kids to go do some hard manual labor,
Mm-hmm.
and also yeah, restaurant work, like just to give you some appreciation for what other human beings have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Broadening your life experience, it just makes you more effective at communicating and gives you more empathy. And I think there's so much good to be said for having some kind of part-time job that's not art related while you get started.
Yeah. And I think even in some ways it then bleeds into your work, like it translates in. Like even with
Yeah,
some of your work, I can see it like within like the creatures and the monsters and I don't
yeah.
know.
All my coworkers.
Actually, is any of them based on either Corey or Annie or like do you feel like any of what you've created has been solely based on like a person you actually know?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there's been teachers and bosses and just people that I've met that have certainly made their way into. I mean, I think you can't help it in a lot of ways, but yeah, that you've personified them in some way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, like I said, I won't take up too much of your time, so I got let's say two more questions here.
Sure,
So the
sure.
first one is from Alice, and they ask, "How many years did it take you to find your art style?" I mean, I
So
guess that's
style,
hard. Or yeah, you go, you go.
yeah, style is sort of a it's a difficult thing to quantify,
Mm-hmm.
and even I think Loomis's description that style is simply gaps in technique is probably a better way of approaching it. I think finding your style is something that people kind of get hung up on early on, when what you should be trying to do is just master techniques, and then eventually your style sort of naturally arises out of a combination of both your artistic temperament, your artistic
Mm-hmm.
goals, and then the techniques you have at your disposal. And so I think your big thing is your temperament's probably not going to change. You probably are who you are as far as that goes. Your techniques, you can do a lot of training to push those further and further and further. And I mean, you live in a golden age right now of art education. So there's so much you could chase. Whether you wanted to go into fine art or illustration or concept art, there's just so much you can do right now that's really um, compelling and interesting. And I am so jealous. I wish I was a student right now. I feel like there's just so much content out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then your style naturally arises out of that. And I think it's wrong. It's a bad idea to chase style before you start
Yes.
chasing those things like technique and better, like just good work habit. And again, trying to figure out what it is that you're most attracted to in art. If you chase style first, it's very likely that in 10 years it's going to be dated, sort of like Instagram filters from 10 years ago. Like you don't want your style to be rooted in that kind of thing. You want rather to have solid foundational techniques and technical skills. And then from there, you can apply, if you have good technique and good skills, you can apply that to any style you want. So yeah, I hope that helps the
I
style.
totally
Just
agree.
don't chase it. Try and pick up all those tricks and gimmicks because that's all it is. Art is a science. It's a science of visual communication, and all you need are tricks and gimmicks, and you can do anything.
Well, I feel like that's a question that always comes up. At least I'm sure at cons you get this a lot, but
Oh
it's always a style question. But it's true where so many younger artists feel like that's so prevalent and important, but it really does come naturally as you continue to do art and like
yeah,
don't focus on it.
exactly. Yeah.
So the last question we have is from Anthony, and they say, "I get a very golden age of Disney vibe from your work. Is there a specific artist of the Nine Old Men that had a big impact with your art?" I'm actually not familiar. What is the Nine Old Men?
So they're the original sort of Disney artists that when you think of Pinocchio and some of those original, the real wonderful ones,
Yeah,
like the Jungle Book and
Cinderella
well,
or
Cinderella
Snow
and
White.
yeah, Snow White. And for me in particular, the Jungle Book, Robin Hood, and some of the ones where they did a lot of really fun stuff with anthropomorphic figures. The one guy, there is one guy in particular. Is it Call? I think who did Shere Khan, the artist who animated Shere
Uh,
Khan. And I want to say it's Call. Somebody correct me in the chat. But yeah, they had a huge effect on my work, and so I take that as a high compliment because of course Disney, they drew a lot of their inspiration from people like Rackham and Bauer and some of those classic Golden Age um, artists, Baumgarten and some of the other ones that they've always been big inspirations for me. So there's probably a huge overlap between my appreciation for the Golden Age illustrators and those early Disney artists that, oh man, I think they had something really magical
it's like
back
a
then.
strange path of like handing the torch, across generations of artists.
Yes, which is something I think it would be a tragedy to lose it just because we're in an era of 3D and green screen and all that, and people might think that that's just the old news. But oh, there's so much wonderful humanity in that art that I feel like it'd be a shame to lose it.
Hmm. I mean, I definitely think the conversation around practical effects, especially after Fury Road, I think it like changed the narrative of why we
Yeah,
need practical effects, and that
yeah,
especially once you saw Star Wars kind of pick up on that same momentum. Now I think it's become like known people would rather have practical effects, but just, sometimes studios just don't have the budgets, I guess. But I think it pays off if you invest in it.
I think so. Yeah, and if you're really trying to do something that's going to be timeless and classical, I just think they're great. Um,
Hmm.
I love the. I also just love it. I think we're in a wonderful era where we still have one foot in the analog world, and now we're one foot into the cyberpunk digital world of the
Yeah.
future. It's a fascinating time where there's suddenly horizons again that we don't know what's on the other side of them. And so I do love that film and art can kind of reflect this interesting moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of the crazy like VR painters that are out there, and like the new way of viewing their work is you actually put on VR your
Yeah,
headset
walk
yourself and like
around.
you explore it. That is
Yeah.
such a strange, bizarre path for art, and I'm like curious to explore it. I don't know if I would ever want to be in it myself, but I'm really excited by the younger artists that are like all about it.
No, it's going to be something. I mean, they've still got some kinks to work out in the VR technology, but it's the thing that like it's going to happen.
Oh,
And at that point,
absolutely.
I feel like the people who are leaning into ZBrush right now and stuff like that, where they're going to have a lot of those 3D skills to translate their work into a
Hmm.
digital 3D environment, in like the holodeck or whatever from Star Trek. Um,
Hmm.
I do feel like there's going to be some amazing stuff that's coming around the corner for artists. I'll be sad because I've pretty firmly leaned into a very specific kind of art, and I don't know how well it will translate into that world. But
Yeah,
I'm very curious to see what the future brings with it.
It's like the beauty of knowing there's so many people in the world that like I know other people are going to explore it far better than I ever would because I don't have as much of an interest. But
Yeah.
I know even with the ZBrush thing, I don't know if it was a demo or a concept that I saw, but they were actually showing like you put on the VR and you could actually walk around like a giant 3D model and you could like I see every I don't know. To me that I find that very intriguing. So yeah.
I think it's intriguing. Yeah.
Okay, well that I'm gonna cut it off here because we're already approaching. You have reached the rank of one of my 3-hour interviews. I hope you know we're at like 257. So it's
Sorry,
a rarity.
everyone.
Oh no, this is great. Honestly, this was one of the best interviews I've had. There was no issues. I didn't have any technical hublub. There's no drop frames from what OBS tells me. Oh, and Anthony says in the chat it was Milt Call.
Milt Call, that's it. Milt. Yeah. So definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And a big inspiration. Big inspiration.
So I guess to end this off, I just want to say thank you again, Justin, for coming to the stream. Oh, you know what? There was something wrong. I usually have like the books and art behind me of what I purchased from the artist. That's what I was missing, but that's okay because you can find it below. I put the links to his shop. I believe I put it to your Instagram and other things. Go follow. If you aren't already following Justin, what are you doing? Like, go follow him and definitely buy some of his stuff. I actually think your latest book, I believe it was called The Plague of Dragons, wasn't it?
Yes, that was it. Yeah.
I don't know if this is gonna come across as like complimentary or not, but I used to actually keep it in my bathroom because whenever I go to the bathroom, I would like turn and like look at it 3 pages while I was doing the business, and then I would put it back. But it was great. I feel like I really explored your book.
I'm glad it could inspire you during those times.
I know it's silly it being in the bathroom for so long, but I was so intrigued by it, I couldn't put it down at points, and it's just I think it's so well made. Do you still have it available in your shop?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Annie and I both have our books up in the Gallery Gerard store.
Perfect. I'm positive I put links to that below, so definitely check that out. I think it's a phenomenal book, especially if you're into creature design, specifically dragons. It's like a must-have at this point. And I think as a whole, you are one of those people that I always tell people, you are the definition of an artist to me. You like achieve the ranks that I put in with Alan and also your wife Annie and like Justin, Jeremy Bastian, all of them that I really look to as not only being really good artists technically and creatively, but I also think you're just genuinely wonderful people. And these are the type of people that I want the people watching these type of interviews to aspire to be. So Justin, you are one of those, and I hope you know it because I definitely feel it, and I know the people I talk to in my own art circles feel that way. So definitely know that you're like top tier for us. If we're like in the tiers, like you were saying earlier, there's not a high bar. I'm like, you're the high bar.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this was great. I love this so much. All right. Well, thank you, Justin. And to everyone in the chat, go check them out right now. And until next time, take care.
Bye, everyone.